Arian, I suspect that my cigarette lighter is going to run out soon. It's stuttering and taking several attempts to get aflame, and even then, it's a weak one. I hope the petrol from the car wreck works in it. I'm sure I heard somewhere that it does. I guess I'll find out soon. Day 27. I think I nearly died last night. I was in a deep sleep. I know that because I was still dreaming some strange dream about glowing spiders when I woke up, even though the noise was loud enough to wake even the dead. Rudy was standing inside the door, his hand to his mouth and one finger over his lips. A voice in my head that wasn't Rudy spoke. "Silence! Don't make a sound!" Something was trying to get into the building, and as the last of the spiders from my dream drifted away, the door shook violently. I'm so glad I propped that broken chair up against the handle. Another violent shake. I was up, grabbing my mace and my knife. I crept quietly towards where Rudy was standing, fighting panic as my heart tried to leap right out of my chest. Then it spoke. Not the voice in my head a moment before, warning me. No, this was another one. It was speaking in plain English, and I understood everything that it said, but it was raspy and deep. The accent, like none I had ever heard. Russian-sounding, but not quite. "I know you are in there, right?" I almost bit off the end of my tongue, stopping myself from calling out in fear. The door shook again, this time even more violently. I heard something crack and realized that whatever was out there was going to get in, and something told me this was no clumsy zombie. Crack! The top hinge of the door broke. Bits of wood scattered across the floor. Then there was growling, and a lot of it. I recognized Dog Thing's deep growl over the noise. But it wasn't just him out there. The others must have returned. Whatever it was that was trying to break down the door hissed in reply. "Another time, then, right?" Footsteps echoed away from the building, and the growling followed. I pulled the chair away, opened the door, swung my mace back, ready to strike just in case, and stepped out. Dog Thing was sitting in the middle of the street. I followed the direction of his gaze, and was in time to see a bunch of maw, a dozen or so, I think, vanish round the corner of a building 2 blocks away. Across the street the manhole was lying half open. "I guess that answers our mystery," said Rudy. I sat down heavily on the pavement, breathing deeply. Screw this. That was Cutter Jack, wasn't it? Yes, that was Cutter Jack. I'd recognize that voice even if 100 years had passed. Rudy was standing in the doorway, watching the road. What the hell do we do now? We leave. We had to. If Cutter Jack came back and the maw weren't here, I didn't stand a chance. I'd seen his shadow and the sheer size of him when the door began to break. For a moment the top corner of the door had leant inwards, giving me a glimpse of the monster that stood outside. He was huge, tall enough to have to crouch down to be able to hit the door. Roughly, I'd say 8 feet tall, and that's only a guess. People don't grow that tall, do they? Not normally, anyway. Dog Thing must have been out there the whole time, but it took a whole pack of maw to scare Cutter Jack away. Now, if that had been me, one Dog Thing would have had me running. The mess in the shop had to have been made by him. I was convinced of it. Unless there were others around here, or the maw and the lizard thing had a set to, and Cutter Jack had arrived afterwards. I don't know. I packed my stuff into the cart as fast as I could, dumping a lot of stuff to make it lighter. The travel guide and the magazines went, making a surprising difference. I'd not realized how heavy they were until I left them behind. Why had I been keeping them anyway? Distance. We had to put some distance between us and Cutter Jack, and then hope we hadn't left enough of a trail for him to follow. I wouldn't have a clue about tracking someone, but I also didn't know how skilled Cutter Jack was. I had a horrible, sickly feeling that he would be able to follow us anywhere if he wanted to. I reckon it was less than 2 minutes later when I hauled the cart outside onto the pavement. Rudy was waiting for me, watching the road where Cutter Jack had fled. Which way? The way he didn't go. We headed along the pavement as quickly as the cart could go. Dog Thing eventually caught us up and followed us, always 20 feet or so behind, always scanning behind us and sniffing the ground. We crossed a road, Malden Street. I had to pull the cart backwards to get it over the cobbles and haul it back up onto the pavement on the other side of the road. I stopped for a moment and looked down Malden. Shop after shop lined the street, 20 of them at least, and no time to look. We hurried for another block and began to cross Merryweather Avenue. Odd name. Rudy stopped in the middle of the road, frowning. "Wait." "What?" "Be quiet." Then I heard it too. Music. Somewhere nearby, music was playing. It was quiet and echoed faintly down Merryweather Avenue. It sounded like it was coming out of a window high up somewhere, and I could see that further down Merryweather there was a row of 3- and 4-story Victorian-style townhouses. One of the buildings, right in the middle of the row, had a window wide open on the top floor. Long draped curtains were hanging out, swaying like they were caught in a breeze, even though I could feel no wind from down on the street. There was a light on in the room. "Is that?" "Yes." "Music. What the hell?" I started walking down the street towards the house, for the second time in as many days, wondering if I had found someone else alive, someone else other than Cutter Jack. "Is this a good idea?" Rudy was following me, but I could see he was hesitant. Why would a ghost be scared? It's not like he could die twice. I didn't consider until now, while I'm writing this, that if I died, he would be trapped again, probably for a long time. "I have no idea." We approached the building slowly, checking every alleyway and door as we went. Cutter Jack had gone the other way, but he was tall, and I imagined he could move fast. I stopped. Now it was my turn to be hesitant. What if we're just walking to Cutter Jack's house? "I'm with you. I say we just run." We both started back down the street again, away from the house, but we'd only traveled a few feet when Dog Thing lowered himself to the ground and started growling. Nearby I heard more growling, and my nerves hissed as I saw 2 other maw dart out from an alleyway that both Rudy and I had checked moments before. Neither of us had seen them. Then we saw him, right down the other end of Merryweather, walking towards us casually, as though he was out for a stroll in the country on a Sunday afternoon. Cutter Jack. "You can't hide from me forever, right? I got your friend, and I'll get you." We ran straight for the house. My heart was thumping again as the front door rushed towards us. I nearly tripped on the cobbles at least twice, and I could almost feel him getting closer to us. I glanced back as Rudy ran up the street to the front door. Down the street the maw were holding him off, but there were only 3 of them, and Cutter Jack had drawn out a pair of long blades and was swinging them in long, swirling patterns as he walked slowly forwards. I turned and ran for the door, colliding with it, hoping it would open, but it was shut tight. Rudy stepped through the door and vanished. "Rudy!" Lots of growling and noise behind me. I tried the handle. Still no luck. Then I rammed the door a second time with my shoulder, but it wasn't budging. "Rudy!" I glanced back over my shoulder to see Cutter Jack standing at the bottom of the steps, grinning at me. The 3 maw, including Dog Thing, were lying in the street. One of them was still barely moving, twitching. I couldn't make out which maw it was. It was over. I knew it was. I pointed my knife at him and pulled my mace back, ready to fight. I didn't stand a chance. I knew that. But he had killed my dogs. I was going to hurt him before he killed me, too. I have no idea how it happened. It was all over far too quickly for me to recall it clearly. Cutter Jack leapt forward at me, much quicker than I had expected, taking the steps and the distance between us before I could even react. I had barely enough time to fall over onto my back. Something hit the door above me with a bang, then another thwack. I tried to roll out of the way, but felt my mace catch on something. Only the weight of me falling off the front porch pulled it away. I think that was when I hit my head. Maybe on the cobbles or on the porch steps as I fell. There was a scream, the kind of noise I imagined I would be making in a few moments. Or was it me screaming? No pain came. Everything went blurry for a while after that. I remember hearing someone bellowing at the top of their voice. It might have been Rudy, but when I came to my senses, it had stopped. It was all over. I was still breathing. Cutter Jack was gone. There was blood all over the sharp end of my mace. A Buddy Holly song was blaring out of the window above me, and I couldn't remember which song it was. I heard Rudy's voice nearby. "Quickly, get up!" I staggered to my feet, still staring in wonder at the end of my mace, unable to figure out how the hell I had managed to fumble my way out of death. "Where the hell were you?" I mumbled. I wanted to shout at him, but my head was still spinning. "I ran inside. I thought you would come through, but you didn't. I could see that you couldn't open the door, so I ran round the house trying to find another way in, or see if there was someone else in there that could open the door. There wasn't." "It's locked up?" "Yes, I figured as much. You have got to see in there." I sat down on the porch steps, trying to catch my breath and slow my heartbeat down. "Then I heard the noise from the maw stop, and I just ran as fast as I could. I have no idea what I was going to do, but couldn't think of anything else. When I ran back through the door, I ran straight into Cutter Jack. I screamed. I know, you must think me a coward, but I'm terrified of him." "No, you're all good there. I'm damn scared of him myself." "Well, I don't know, but I think I made him jump." I looked up at this, almost smiled. "You frightened him?" "Well, I doubt that, but I don't think he expected someone to come running through a closed door. You do realize your mace was stuck in his leg, don't you?" "Was it? I thought it was caught on his clothes or something. I think I fell off the porch." "Yes, you did, but so did he. He stumbled back from me and tripped over you." At this I did laugh, and Rudy laughed too. I was avoiding looking over towards where I knew the maw would be lying dead. Anything mildly funny was enough for me at that moment. Then Rudy stopped laughing, and his jaw almost dropped off. I followed the direction of his gaze, my stomach lurching, as I expected to see Cutter Jack coming back again. The maw had gone. "What the—" "They've gone. How?" "How the hell should I know?" We both moved quickly then, jogging over to where we had last seen the maw. My head was still fuzzy, but seeing the bodies of the maw missing sobered me up fast. There was blood over the cobbles where they had each fallen, but not as much blood as I had expected. "Let's get into the house, just in case he comes back," I said, heading over to grab the cart from where I had abandoned it. James? I don't think he is coming back any time soon," said Rudy. I stopped and turned round. Rudy was standing in front of the porch, staring at the ground. "Why?" "Because I think this is a bit of his leg." I pushed the cart as quickly as I could and went over to look at Rudy's grisly find. "Oh, hell, that's gross!" There was a lump of bloody flesh about the size of my fist lying in the street. I'd literally taken a chunk out of Cutter Jack. "And if he does come back, he's going to need some new knives," said Rudy, pointing up at the door. They were embedded at least 6 inches into the wood. One was protruding from the door, and the other was stuck hard in the wooden floorboards of the porch. Cutter Jack had left his knives behind. It took me about 5 minutes to pry the one out of the floor, while Rudy went round inside the building, trying to find a way I could get in. It was no small knife. The blade was about 2 feet long and as sharp as a Stanley knife. Damn, if that thing had gone in me instead of the door. Whew. The one in the door took longer. I just managed to pull it out when Rudy came back. "There's a window at the back on the 2nd floor. I think if you can get up there, you might be able to get in. There is a rope hidden behind the drain pipe. I didn't spot it at first. It's well hidden. All the other windows in the house apart from that one and the one on the top floor are all shored up on the inside. Someone made a fortress out of this place." We left the cart at the front of the house and made our way round the row of buildings and into an alleyway. It looked like someone had been shoving their junk into the alley for years. I had to climb over 3 fences before we got into the yard. I couldn't see the rope, even when I looked behind the pipe. Then I noticed a bit of it poking out of a hole in the drain, high up near the window. It went inside through a small gap where the window had been left open just a little bit. The rope was tucked into the pipe. Whoever had put it there had hidden it well, cutting a slit all the way from the top to the bottom and stuffing it inside. Day 28. We are holed up in the house. All the windows are shut and the doors locked. I hauled the rope up and pulled it back through the window. There is so much to say about what we have discovered in the house, but I've not had the time. Feeling sick and dizzy, I need to sleep. I asked Rudy if he had spoken to me when Cutter Jack was trying to bang the door down in the building opposite the shop the night before. He says he didn't. I shrugged it off. Maybe I'd imagined that I heard it, but I was almost certain that someone had spoken to me. It hadn't been Cutter Jack. Why would he have told me to be silent and still? He wouldn't have. Someone other than Rudy had told me. Someone who didn't want Cutter Jack to find me. Silence! Don't make a sound. Day 29. Rudy thinks I may have had a slight concussion from when I hit the paving after my fall. I remember being dazed for a while afterwards, so I guess he could be right. I don't have any injuries, though, so if I did bang my head, it can't have been too hard. I think I've just been feeling sick from fear after nearly being butchered. I know I've fought with zombies a couple of times now, and they are gruesome looking, but they are slow, and I always had time to line myself up for each swing. Well, nearly every time. Cutter Jack was different, and I think that's why I've been feeling sick. Luck. Just luck. Nothing else. That was all that had kept me alive during my brief fight with Cutter Jack. If it hadn't been for me falling at the right time and Rudy walking through the door at the same moment, Cutter Jack would have torn me to shreds. He was so fast, I barely even had the time to realize he was on me, let alone react. What we found in the house was nothing short of a revelation. Exactly what we needed. Adler had lived here. No, we're not sure how long ago. Could be a decade or more, or it could have been yesterday. But we found all kinds of maps and notes. I've read journal after journal detailing lots of random stuff about what he found here. I'm taking a few of them with me, hoping that if I get the chance at some point, I can put them in order, piece together everything. But for right now, we found some quite interesting stuff. This one, from a diary that looks old, put a smile on Rudy's face. I regretted leaving within days. Of course, I still knew my primary goal was to return home, but leaving Rudy was a hard thing to do. He wouldn't listen, though, wouldn't hear reason. I decided that I should still make one journey back, one last attempt to convince him to leave. Alas, my dear friend is gone. I returned too late. My tormentor must have followed me back to the shack, found Rudy, and ended him. It's my fault. I should have never taken the compasses, and I should never have given one to Rudy. What else could I do, though? I had to stop Cutter Jack from doing what he has been doing for so long. I couldn't stay and bury Rudy, though it pained me not to. Cutter Jack had killed Rudy very recently, maybe only hours before, so would still be close by. I had to keep moving. I'm sorry, Rudy, for everything. If only I could explain. The compass that I gave to Rudy was gone, either lost or back in the hands of that monster. He came back. Rudy seemed pleased at that, and went quiet for a time. There was more. A lot of what is in the journals is undecipherable. The handwriting is too messy. Maybe I can sit down sometime and figure it out, but for now I have to use what I can read in this dim light. I went back further to a previous journal. The compasses, they are his keys. How the damn thing works, I have no idea. But I know that the compasses that I took are the keys, and while they are not in his possession, he can do no more evil. When I can retrieve the fourth, I may be able to figure out a way of using the device to escape, but with only 3 of them, all I can do is hide them from him, and keep searching. I I can't risk him catching me up and getting all 3 back so easily. I went back to the first place that came to mind, somewhere that I knew would be ideal for hiding at least one of them, the scrapyard. The safe would still be there, hidden among the trash, where I found the stash of Roman coins. I'm so glad I still have the key for it. There were no constructs there, or there shouldn't have been. It took me quite a time to get back, but it was worth the trek. I'm not sure what I will do with the third. For now, I will stash it in the toolbox on the bus, and hope I can find somewhere more suitable. I need to go back to the bus anyway to get the torch. I found batteries in one of the houses on Malden Street. I stopped reading at that moment and ran down the stairs to the cart. There it was, right where he said he had hidden it. How I had never spotted it, I don't know. I thought that I had emptied the box out. It was tucked inside a small compartment at the bottom of the toolbox. Adler's toolbox, the one that I had found on the bus. Another compass. I had 2 of them all along, and the third was in some kind of safe in the scrapyard. I didn't remember seeing a safe, but at least I knew where to start searching. There was more in Adler's diaries. I skipped through them until I found what I thought might be the most recent. None of it was dated. He nearly caught up with me again today, but was unable to keep up the speed once I put some legwork in. If I hadn't fixed up the chain on the bicycle, I think he would have had me. I was pleased to not have to hear a constant squeak as I rode, but it would seem that my efforts paid off tenfold. I have a dilemma. Considering what I have heard and seen, I can't in good conscience just give him back the compasses. But now I have him hunting me, and I'm not sure if I can keep up this game of cat and mouse for much longer. If it isn't him, then it's those damn creatures he has control of. Disgusting abominations that they are. I had no idea that the creation of such a creature was even possible, or that anyone would have a mind twisted enough to conceive them in the first place. But then I suppose there are many things in the corridor that don't make sense, or even follow the laws of nature. I should be used to the unexpected by now.
"That would explain why the zombies were in the scrapyard when you arrived here," said Rudy.
You mean they were searching for the safe, for the third compass?
Seems reasonable to me.
I didn't see a safe anywhere. I know there is a shed load of junk to hide one under, but... I stopped talking. Of course.
James?
The microwave.
The what?
There was something in the junkyard right near to where I first arrived. I thought it was a television or a microwave, but it was a solid block of metal. It's quite possible it could have been a safe. I never managed to turn it over. I asked Rudy what Adler meant by the corridor.
That's what he called this place. He said he found it in one of the few remaining books in the library. Said the building was somewhere in the city, but it was burnt out. There was half of a book left, a history book or something like it, detailing the past of the city.
Strange thing to call it.
Yes, though, that was just what Adler called it. He said the name was obscured in the writing, the something corridor. Actually, I remember it now. He said the same went for the city. It was called something else. The was only part of the name. Adler was convinced that both the building and even most of the corridor didn't exist here once. He thought that somehow it all just ended up here. Like all of us, I suppose. I don't know if I believe all that, but I envied him that he even had some ideas. He was clever, the professor, and I'm a much simpler man than he was.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Not only does it seem that I have ended up somewhere that I don't belong, but according to our mad professor friend Adler, the place where I ended up shouldn't be here either. I wonder if we are all in some kind of limbo, like purgatory, but that wouldn't make sense either. Am I dead? I didn't think so. Not yet. Day 30. There were diaries everywhere, stacked up on shelves, piled high in corners, and left lying around in seemingly random locations. Neither of us knew where to begin. In a strange way, it was fortunate that most of them were completely illegible. I think that at some point the majority of them must have been soaked in water. Maybe the building wasn't watertight. There were some entries that I could still read, but a lot of that was meaningless garbage. The light in the upstairs room was handy as hell. I didn't have to run down any of my own supplies. It was set up the same as the lamp had been in the shop, attached to a battery. It wasn't bright, but it was light enough to read by. The same battery powered the small tape player that was blasting out the same few songs over and over again until I switched it off. How the battery had lasted so long, I have no idea. Dotted all round the house were the strange objects that Adler had collected. In the middle of one of the downstairs rooms, there was a 6-foot-tall statue made entirely of scrap metal. I wasn't sure what it was supposed to be. It looked like a kind of grotesque winged angel, and it was so intricate in design that it must have taken him weeks to build it. That is, if he even made it himself. I suppose he could have found it somewhere. It didn't even need propping up. It stood there, balanced of its own accord. Plates. Hundreds and hundreds of damn things, all stacked on shelves or hanging on the walls. Some were actually real plates, either plastic or metal or crockery. Is that what they are called? Crockery? The hell is a crock anyway? I don't know. Most of them were those display things you see in pubs and old houses. Who needs that many plates anyway? The cooker doesn't even work without any electricity. The best find for me was the wardrobe full of clothes. It seems that Adler had made quite a collection of clothing over the years. Most of it looked about my size. After close to a month in the same rags, I was glad to dump them in exchange for something that was at least clean. I found a couple of pairs of reasonably undamaged jeans and put a pair on. A full change of clothing later, I felt a lot more comfortable and glad to be rid of those oversized, ripped-up, and dirty trousers. There was more in the wardrobe. Stuffed into the bottom were 3 pairs of boots, proper walking ones. Again, they were a bit tatty, with worn treads, but they were so much more comfortable than the tatty boots that I'd been wearing for a month. There was also a belt with some small carry pouches on it, like the ones hikers wear. I stuffed some of my more important things into each of the pouches. My lighter, keys, wallet, a bottle of water. The journal fitted in there with some room still left. There were even little knife holders and a strap that held the battery torch. Don't know why, I put the harmonica in. Strewn all over the house, either in boxes or stuffed onto shelves, was every type of tool imaginable. Dozens of hammers and saws, boxes of screws and nails. There was even one of those electric bench cutters plugged into a wall socket. Completely useless. At least, that is what we thought. How the hell had Adler got that thing into the house? Maybe it was already here when he arrived. Then Rudy called me. He was in the back room on the ground floor. All the windows were blocked up, and the back door out into the garden was boarded over double thick with wooden planks. Set up in the middle of the room was something I hadn't expected. The front half of a car. The wheels had been removed, and the whole frame was propped up on rows of bricks. All the metal paneling had been removed to reveal the engine, the dashboard, and the ignition. He'd even removed the steering wheel. Where the exhaust should have poked out, there was a long, bendy plastic pipe attached. It was hanging on bits of string that were nailed to the ceiling. The pipe ran across the room and up the chimney, where it was nailed to the wall about 3 feet up, just below a metal grid that blocked the chimney, but let the air in. The key was still in the ignition, so I turned it on, not expecting a damn thing to happen, but it did. The engine coughed a little and spluttered, and then gave a roar that made me nearly jump out of my skin. It juddered and hummed away happily. It was noisy, but I thought, screw it. It's not like I've been that effective at staying hidden anyway. All the lights in the house came on. Rudy was pointing at something lying on a chair in the corner of the room. It was another journal, one that looked more recent than the others. The ink was much clearer than the other books. Of course, it could still have been written years ago. There was only one entry. I found the fourth key, and I'm going to collect the others now. Hopefully I can make it all the way to the device and activate it. Maybe, just maybe, it will take me home. During Cutter Jack's curses and taunts, while he was outside the house, he let slip about some of his deeds on earth, the things he took, the horrific and brutal things he did to people. So overcome with his own pride, that terrible creature, he didn't even realize that the threats of what he had done to his past victims were giving away clues as to how to resolve my own predicament. Even if it takes me somewhere completely different, it has to be better than here. I could cope reasonably with another world, or even another universe, but to be stranded in this dark and claustrophobic place for the rest of my days, forever hunted by a creature of such evil intent, that is a thought that makes me cold to my heart. I cannot even bear to contemplate the possibility of becoming one of his abominations. Of all the places the key could have been, I would never have guessed. Why would someone have poked it under the door? How did I not see it there before? I spent hours gazing at that white flower. Maybe someone pushed the key under there because they didn't want Cutter Jack to find it. I thought I would never know, until that damnedest of creatures came to taunt me once more, a few nights ago. It was something he said about chasing one of my predecessors up to the door that those ones had locked in on me. His English is thoroughly common. No, that would be an insult to common folk, a barbaric half-wit at best. Regardless of that, he murdered the man right there, right where we had camped for all those days, while Rudy and I tried to get the door open. I'd never even thought to look there, and I wasn't looking for a key when I went there. Something knotted up inside me. I had to go and look up there to see if there was any evidence of Cutter Jack's victim. There was. That pile of rocks hid more than other bits of rubble. I covered the poor man back up again after I said a few words. It was the least I could do. In a way, I feel that his life was extinguished to my benefit, as self-centered as that may sound. If he had not died there then, Cutter Jack would never have mentioned it, and in turn I would never have been led to find the final piece of the puzzle. I swore I would place a memorial of some kind to my anonymous benefactor one day. I only regret that there was no form of identification upon the remains. I will never know who he was. I'm leaving my diaries here in case someone else happens to end up here. Cutter Jack can't read. If he could, he would have been able to understand the note that I left for him. But I could see from my hiding-place, peering out of the top window of the house, that he couldn't. He looked too puzzled. He also couldn't get into the house if it's secured properly. He tried often enough. I don't think he is the cleverest of creatures. How he gained the knowledge to do such things as he does, I have no clue. My journey will have to take me across the swamp, even though I dread the mere thought of it. Every other way is crawling with creatures. If you are reading this now, then I hope that you will find the place that I travel to now, and I hope you find the device intact. Know now that it is the same device that Cutter Jack has used for centuries to travel to other places and perform his butchery. So beware of him on your journey. The device is located near to the wall, past the junkyard. The wall somehow marks the boundary of this place, but I cannot tell you. I have not yet discovered why. Only that a scrawled note in a book that I found in the library suggests that it is dangerous to go beyond the wall. Do not ever cross to the other side of the wall from the ground, it said, and seek the house that was never built. I didn't know what that meant when I first read it, but it's obvious when you are there. You'll know it when you see it. Rudy and I stood quietly for what seemed a long time. It was he who spoke first, but we both knew what this last note meant.
He never made it, did he?
Doesn't look like it. He never got the key from the bus, otherwise I never would have found it, and he never came back to where you died to find the other one.
He went through the swamp. Why, that's just suicidal.
I don't think he had much choice.
No, I suppose not. But I'd rather face those, what do you call them?
Zombies?
Yes, them. I'd rather have to fight my way through them than try and get through the Gargants.
That reminded me of something I had never asked Rudy since the dreams that led me to him. Do you remember that you said they weren't zombies during my dreams before I came to the shack?
Yes, of course.
Well, what did you mean?
Rudy shrugged. I didn't know what a zombie was.
It took me 5 minutes to stop laughing. Then I remembered something and stopped damn quickly.
Damn? What?
I've already crossed the wall. Rudy looked puzzled. In the professor's notes. I took the book and showed him that last page. He says right there, don't cross over the wall from the ground. I've already done that. Well, once anyway. It was back when I first got here. I had a camp right against the wall. I had to leave it because it got overrun with zombies. It was when I met Dog Thing. I was running from the zombies, and there was one that was in the way. It had a head that it was swinging.
It was swinging its head?
No, it was swinging another head. It had hold of it by the hair. Well, I set fire to it, and I had to jump over the end of the wall to escape it.
Oh, I see.
We both stood quietly for a while. Do you think I'm screwed?
No, look, Adler doesn't say why, does he?
No, I suppose he doesn't.
Well, it may only be some kind of warning. You know, don't go over the wall. There are all manner of nasty things over there. He doesn't actually say that crossing it is the bad thing.
Yes, he does. It says right there, do not ever cross from the ground.
Well, you're still here, aren't you?
Yes.
Right.
I miss Dog Thing.
Yes, me too.
Day 31. The nausea and headaches seemed to have stopped, so I packed up my stuff. There was a proper hiker's backpack stuffed in among a lot of junk that the professor had collected. It was quite tatty, with a few holes in it, but fixable. From what I found in it and threw away, he had probably used it a few times and then left it. It was huge. I couldn't imagine anyone going for any length of time on a bicycle with that monstrosity on their back. For me, it was a godsend. If we were to head into the swamp, then I couldn't take my cart any more. I filled the pack with as many supplies and kit as I could, but left a lot of heavier stuff. I had to leave most of the petrol and some of the water behind, just because of the weight. I kept 2 bottles of petrol, though. Fortunately, seeing in the dark was no longer an issue. My eyes adjusted alarmingly fast to the darkness now. I even managed to attach the 2 long blades that Cutter Jack had left behind to the back of the pack, after I had wrapped them in a tatty gray shirt that looked too small for me anyway. I wasn't having those 2 sharp blades hanging loose. One accidentally fall, and they would dice me. I'd like to say I made decent holders for them. What were they called? A scabbard? But that wasn't the case. I'd have to untie them if I needed them. It was kind of handy and reassuring. I had this horrible image of Cutter Jack sneaking up on me and pulling his blades off my pack. The same image was less worrying when it involved him standing there for 5 minutes untying them. I locked up the house again and stuffed the rope into the pipe. We set out a few hours after I'd woken up, moving as quickly as we could out of the city and making a direct route to the swamp. There were no maw around now, so I was uneasy for the first hour or so. The ground was hard, mostly rock, so signs of us passing were few, at least as far as I could see. I think it took us about 3 hours to reach the small group of buildings at the edge of the swamp. Neither of us had expected to see buildings there, let alone one so intact. We started checking rooms and finally found some kind of campfire in a room on the ground floor of the largest house. There was no way of knowing it had been left years ago by the professor. While Rudy took a look round some of the other buildings, I walked down to the swamp's edge. There were a few small pods growing in a bush right next to where the path started. Of course, I hadn't expected there to be a path either. It was about 10 feet across and made from piled-up earth and rocks that had flattened from use. Who had used it? I don't know. I presumed that it had been made a long time ago. The path twisted through the swamp in a snake-like fashion. Dotted here and there were large rocks jutting out of the stinking mud.
"Well, that makes our journey a lot easier," said Rudy when he saw the path.
"Aye. I wonder if it goes all the way across."
"Well, I've never seen a path on the other side, but it could be hidden or come out in an area that I've not been to. I've been along a lot of the shoreline on the other side of the swamp, but I didn't always follow the edge. There are large areas of rocks that I just went around."
"I guess we will find out." Rudy wanted me to rest in one of the buildings before we moved on. He was convinced that I might not get another chance. But I wanted to put as much distance between myself and Cutter Jack as possible. Even if he was wounded, I still had this gut feeling that it wouldn't stop him following us if he found our trail. The trail meandered through the swamp for what seemed miles, and I was glad of it because away from the hard ground was deep, sludgy mud. I had thought that all the plants I'd seen growing in the corridor were strange, until I walked through that swamp. Clustered all along the trail were plants weirder than anything I had ever seen. Dotted here and there were huge, bulbous green blobs 15 feet across, with spikes that looked like sharpened spears jutting out of them. Massive lily pad plants, probably 20 or 30 feet in diameter, hung a few feet above the sludgy mud. The underneath covered in thick, moving tentacles that seemed to sift through the swamp, occasionally popping up with some unfortunate creature that it would then wrap in tentacles until the creature vanished from sight into a tight cocoon. There were reeds that must have been 50 feet high, reaching upwards into the darkness, glistening with something that looked sticky, and crawling with strange cockroach creatures the size of my fist. And the mushrooms. I had thought the mushrooms I found in the field near the junkyard were massive, but these things stood almost the size of a house. After a couple of miles of walking along the path, it became clear that it didn't head towards the shack, but with a bit of debate, we figured out how to roughly guess where we were heading.
"The zombie trail," said Rudy. "Somewhere along the trail that runs the other side of the swamp, I'd say."
"Maybe it will be clear. Maybe we killed most of them in the fight at the shack."
"Maybe."
He didn't sound convinced.
"We have a bigger problem, though. Look."
He was pointing along the path. We had passed quite a few of them while negotiating our way along the swamp trail. Fortunately, they were all a long way away. I'm not sure how, luck probably, but each time we saw another one, they were far enough away not to notice us. We were moving quickly, not wanting to be down in the swamp any longer than we had to. But as we started to see rocks and dry ground in the distance, probably 4 or 5 hours after first setting off across the swamp, our luck ran out. A gargant was sitting on the path, a massive gargant. It was easily the size of a double-decker bus, and was right over the path, sprawled out, munching on some old vegetation that grew all over the place, and it didn't look like it had any intention of moving.
"Crap! James, it gets worse."
"What?"
"Behind us."
They'd found us. At least a dozen of them, behind us on the trail, staggering slowly along. For all I knew, they were more hidden in the mist that obscured my vision past 100 yards or so. The zombies were back. Double crap.
"We're trapped. This is not good."
Okay, no panicking. My mind raced. I was panicking. I grabbed my mace and tried to decide which form of death I was going to face first. No Ma with us to fend off the zombies, and not even the slightest clue what to do about moving a gargant, which, to make it worse, seemed to have noticed us, and was hauling its fat butt off the ground and along the trail, no doubt with the intent of coming over to munch on me. I hope you like swamps, Rudy, because if we can't think of something fast, you might be following a gargant around for a while. I dropped my pack to the ground and fumbled for the bottles of oil. I knew that the zombies could be burned, and there was no way I was going to handle a dozen of them on my own. Why the hell does everything take so much longer when you are in a hurry? If I had been hunting for something else, the damn petrol would have been sitting on top of everything else.
"What now?"
asked Rudy. He was hovering next to me. The fear rising inside me was equally detectable in his voice. "Pray," I snapped back, and felt immediately guilty. I poured the first bottle of oil onto the ground, drawing a line all the way across the trail, and then stepped over it onto the side where the gargant was. It only took a couple of flicks of my lighter, and the oil burst into flame. The roaring heat quickly swept along the line and rose up nearly to my waist. I had to jump back away from the flames. Foul-tasting smoke filled my lungs. The zombies were now about 30 feet away and closing slowly. The nearest one was another bizarre creation that should never have walked. It had two heads, one right where it should have been, but facing in the wrong direction entirely, and the other protruding from its bulbous stomach. There were far too many eyes glaring at me out of that bloated, rotten face, and each of them with sheer hatred. The zombies didn't seem at all fazed by the fire, but then I didn't expect them to be. I had to hope that they would carry on moving slowly enough for my thin line of fiery defense to catch them. Otherwise, I was screwed. The gargant, on the other hand, was reacting in a way I hadn't expected. It screamed loudly. I mean, extremely loud as a fire alarm going off right next to your face kind of loud. That piercing noise would have carried across miles if echoes had even worked here. I felt the noise reverberating through my skull, and for a panicked moment thought my head was going to explode. That would have been a really rubbish way to go out. The enormous slug didn't like the fire, or it didn't like the brightness, or the heat, or something, and with that sudden realization, I grabbed my pack back and pulled out one of the remaining torches, lighting it on the burning path. As stupid as I thought it was, I started forwards towards the gargant, burning torch in one hand, bottle of oil in the other. I would never have been this reckless and stupid back home. I hadn't a clue at the time how much I would regret it later.
"What are you doing?"
shouted Rudy. I almost laughed.
"James, have you completely lost your mind?"
"Absolutely." I glanced back at the fire to see the first of the zombies walk mindlessly into it. Bellyface had caught fire a treat and was a walking inferno in seconds. Damn if those eyes didn't start popping. But he was still stumbling forward, a walking Guy Fawkes, still intent on coming for me. The second zombie stepped into the flames. I turned back to the gargant, my main problem, and nearly jumped back again as I discovered that I was only about 20 feet away from it. Trust me, 20 feet is way too close when it comes to a giant tentacle slug. It reared forward at me, screeching. I had seriously pissed it off. I began waving the torch backwards and forwards and psyching myself up, ready to hurl the oil at it. It was furious, screeching at me at the top of its voice and throwing out tentacles and spit to try and knock the torch out of my hand. But it wasn't coming any closer. It didn't like fire. And it liked it even less when I threw the oil on the ground and lobbed the torch at it. Fact: zombies burn well. Important fact: gargants burn so much better. They also move through swamp a lot faster than I expected. I hadn't even seen the other ones approaching, but soon spotted them when the burning gargant went screaming off through the muck towards them at full speed. It was popping and sizzling and leaving massive bits behind as it bulldozed its way through the other gargants, which in turn were catching fire as the one that I had lit up smashed into them one by one. Then I realized why they burned so well. It wasn't the gargant at all. It was the damn swamp, the stuff the gargant was covered in. It must have been oil, or even some form of gas being given off by all the dead and rotten crap. It didn't matter. It still meant the same thing. The swamp was on fire. A burst of flame erupted from the mud, reaching up into the darkness like a geyser, spewing out hot steam and launching a spray of hot, fiery mud over everything that was nearby. I was lucky to be out of range. The hot mud splattered across the swamp and spread the fire even further. Then, with one almighty whoosh, the fire took hold. The geysers burst upwards every 10 feet or so, launching debris over everything. Soon the flames were spreading out from where the gargants were burning, sweeping across the swamp at such a speed I barely had time to react. I looked around for any form of cover, but there was nothing nearby, just clumps of vegetation and a scattering of rocks. I spun back round to where my pack was lying, about 30 feet away, reaching distance for the zombies that now crawled their way along the trail. My flaming barrier had set fire to them, but it wasn't stopping them. Rudy was edging his way along the path towards me now, keeping his distance from the zombies. They couldn't hurt him. I guess that was one of the advantages of already being dead, but that didn't stop him being afraid of them. He glanced at my pack as he passed it and looked worriedly at me, then picked up his pace. Across the swamp the fire was spreading fast. All around me was lit up like a furnace. I think I was lucky that it wasn't gallons of pure oil. I can't imagine what the explosion would have been like if it had been. No way to go back and get my pack, not even my mace, which was lying on the floor next to it. Oh, for hindsight.
Run!
That voice was in my head again, the same one that spoke to me when Cutter Jack first showed up.
Run! Don't go back! Don't stop! Just run!
Rudy caught up with me as the flames swept over the path where I had dropped my pack. The zombies, about 10 feet behind him, were consumed by the inferno seconds later.
Don't go back!
Who was in my head? It wasn't Rudy. It wasn't Cutter Jack. The voice was softer, almost feminine, but not quite.
Run! Run! Run!
I ran, finally snapping out of my fears, taking off along the path as fast as my legs would carry me, cursing at myself out loud with every breath. Then it was there, the end of the path, and dry ground, 50 or so feet away. Close enough to hope, but yet it still seemed so much further. Time seemed to stop dead for me. That sprint through the fire seemed to last forever, and I could feel the heat of the flames burning my back as I finally hit the rocks and struggled upwards out of the swamp. I had no idea if Rudy was with me. I hadn't looked back once. It was the path that saved me. The rocks and dry, sandy ground gave the flames nothing to burn, so the fire swept past me on both sides. It reached the end of the swamp much sooner than I did. At the top of the slope, I collapsed, rolled over onto my back, and lay there, stunned, as the expanse of the swamp behind me lit up in flames. Gargants were screaming, unable to escape from the heat. All of those strange alien plants were destroyed, one by one turning black and then withering to nothing as the fire consumed them. I watched, dumbfounded and horrified, as a line of behemoth-sized mushrooms in the distance lit up like bonfires, burning bright blue for a few seconds before collapsing. Rudy sat down next to me, and we both watched as the entire swamp burned. What else could we do?
"Well, that went better than I thought it would,"
said Rudy eventually. I laughed and laughed. I have no idea why that was my reaction. I could have just completely incinerated an entire ecosystem for all I knew. That swamp might be the only place in the entire universe where some of those things grew. The Gargants, as much as they disgusted and frightened me, hadn't actually done anything to harm me, yet, and I roasted a heap of them.
"Well, I'm glad you find all of this funny."
It's not funny at all. After about 10 minutes, Rudy went back into the fire, walking unharmed through the flames and along the path. It had been his idea, even though I had thought about it. I didn't want to ask him. Dead or not, I wouldn't have volunteered to step into a burning fire. But it seemed that during my run out of the inferno, I'd inadvertently dragged him right through the flames. I didn't know what he meant at first, but then realized that he was bound to stay near me, near the key. If I ran, he had no choice but to follow. If our judgment was correct, and I went down the slope as far as I could without getting scorched, then he might be able to get to the pack and see if there was anything worth salvaging. He paused for a moment before stepping into the fire, and I cringed as he disappeared from view. There's something not right about being able to walk through a blazing fire. He came back a few minutes later with a dour look.
There may be some things left, but most of it looks burnt beyond scavenging. I don't know if it is worth waiting for, I'm afraid. Some of the tins of food might be usable, but most of the rest has been destroyed. Your mace is still there, and I think Cutter Jack's blades are under the burnt pack, but I couldn't move anything to get a better look.
I have to wait.
What? But the flames might take days to go away.
I don't have any choice. I have to wait at least a few hours. I don't have a weapon other than a couple of poxy knives. They won't do me much good if I have to kill zombies or if Cutter Jack turns up again. I left it all there.
We can make it to the shack in a day if we don't stop, maybe.
Have you forgotten where we are? The zombie trail.
Of course I hadn't forgotten, but the zombies are slow. You could outrun them, outwalk them even.
All the way to the shack? We don't even know exactly how far it is, and I'm already knackered.
Okay, we wait. Maybe you're right. Maybe it will be gone in a few hours.
We both looked over at the swamp. If anything, the flames were getting higher. Maybe. I checked my pouches. No food. I had one bottle of water, but other than that, I had little more than I had started with over a month ago. Just the things that I had put in the pouches that morning. I put my head in my hands and felt like crying. I think if Rudy hadn't been there, I would have done. Instead, my mind started racing, trying to find a plan to hold on to, something to stop me going completely insane. I had to find more supplies fast. I knew I could get pods from along the swamp's edge if I could find a bit that wasn't burning. There were pools of water in among the rocks up near the shack, but that meant going back there, going back to where there might be more zombies. All of this, and we were still no nearer to finding out where Adler had gone. I slept underneath an overhanging of rock that we found a few hundred yards back from the swamp. It was about as far as I could go before I was ready to collapse, which completely put an end to Rudy's idea of keeping moving until we made the shack. I was breathing heavily and kept coughing up black crap. I guess I hadn't realized how bad the fumes from the fire had been. I lay there for a while, huddled on the floor, trying to get comfortable enough to sleep without my blanket and my pillow. That pillow had stunk, but I would have given almost anything for it now. I couldn't get it out of my head, going over and over everything that had happened in those few seconds on the path. Everything lost because I took the pack off. It would seem that I was out for the count for probably double what I normally slept. At least that's what Rudy said. Not that he has a clock to keep time by. Maybe being a ghost for years and years forces you to learn other ways of dealing with things. He also said I was coughing most of the time, and he even tried to wake me because he was worried that I was going to conk out on him. I didn't wake up, no matter how many times he called me, and of course he couldn't nudge me. Day 32. The last bottle of water only lasted until the morning. My throat was dry and sore, and the water seemed to be the only thing that helped. We headed back to the swamp slowly. I hadn't felt this bad since I had first woken up in the junkyard, though at least it wasn't my whole body that was aching, only my chest and my throat. I think my hearing is worse as well, and all I can smell is a harsh, burnt stench. The flames were still burning hours later when we got back to the edge of the swamp. A bit of luck, though. The flames along the swamp trail had died down a little. Not completely, but enough that I might be able to make my way back along to where my pack was. I was about to go for it when a low growl a few feet away absolutely made my day. Right behind us, about 20 feet away, perched on a rock watching, was a scruffy, furry canine with teeth that were far too big for its mouth and bright eyes the size of my fist. It cocked its head to one side and made a snorting noise that almost sounded like, "Oops." Dog thing. If I could have given Dog Thing a hug at that moment, I would have done, but I don't think he would have appreciated it. There were no visible signs of any wounds that he might have taken during the fight in the street, but I was certain he was missing a few bits of fur. Not that it appeared to have made any difference. He seemed his usual self. Rudy did his best to persuade me not to go into the fire, but what does he understand? He is already dead. He doesn't have any attachment to material things any more. He seems to have forgotten that he once depended on them. Well, apart from the compasses, he was fidgety until I showed him that I still had those tucked away on the chain under my shirt. God forbid I lost them. I almost backed out anyway, even though the flames were nowhere near as bad as they had been the day before. It was still damn hot walking along the trail. Fires still burned on either side of the path as I made my way along it, and I had to dodge from side to side a few times to avoid them. Every step I took along the path left me increasingly paranoid about one of those damn geyser things exploding a few feet away from me, but nothing happened. I got to the remains of my kit without getting roasted. It was almost a write-off. Almost. Zombie Bane was charred, but thankfully still usable. I rummaged through my smoldering remains of my supplies with one of my knives. Most of the food and anything flammable, which meant pretty much everything, had burned, including the pack itself, but 2 tins were still intact. There was some plastic sheeting still usable, and the screwdriver, the saw, the spanner. One of the petrol lamps was also salvageable. I used the bits of plastic sheeting as a bag and dumped everything in it. How typical. Just after I've gotten myself sorted with kit, I lose nearly all of it. Underneath the blackened remains were Cutter Jack's 2 long blades. They were still pristine. Not even a speck of ash clung to the blades. Of course, the cloth that I had wrapped them in was gone. Incredibly, one of the zombies was still going. It was armless, legless, and burnt to a crisp, flapping around on the floor, hissing and spitting at me, desperate to sink its teeth in. I jumped when it first made a noise, my nerves tingling. It was only about 5 feet away, and had laid perfectly still, smoking and stinking the whole time I was sifting through my gear. It felt so good to cave the damn thing's head in. One satisfying crunch later, and it stopped moving. Am I becoming heartless? Yes, I think so. I don't have any sympathy for these creatures, and deep inside I know I should. Am I putting them out of their misery? Are they even in misery? I don't know, but it feels better to keep telling myself that. My joy was short-lived. That one smack on the zombie's head, and Zombie Bane fell apart in my hands. I nearly took myself out in the process as a sharp piece of it sprang off and bounced off my leg. Lucky this time. I picked up the 2 blades that still lay on the floor and weighed them up. I didn't know if I was going to be able to use both of them at once, as Cutter Jack had. I guessed I would find out. I actually walked up out of the swamp with a smile on my face. It was daft. After the disaster of the previous day, there was I, grinning from ear to ear. I was still alive after taking on a gargant and a bunch of zombies. I had Dog Thing back, and I still had some remnants of my kit to keep me going. Not much, but enough. I kept telling myself that I'd done this once already, crawled out of the darkness with nothing and still lived, so I could do it all over again. The first fight happened roughly an hour after that. We had set off immediately. Rudy tried to get me to rest up more. I was still coughing up crap, but I was determined to move on. It had only been an hour or so since I'd woken up, and although I was feeling knackered again already, I was not staying by the swamp, breathing in more fumes. Dog Thing sensed them first, 4 of them, and we saw them long before they were anywhere near us. They lumbered slowly out of the darkness, mist swirling around them like some cheap effect in a low-budget horror film. Not messing about this time, I was ready for them. Well, sort of. If I managed to fight with Cutter Jack's blades. We took down 2 each, though Dog Thing did make the first kill. I'll happily give him that. Less than 20 seconds, I would say, and they were in bits all over the ground. I was getting better at this. Cutter Jack's blades rock. I can't believe I just wrote that. Idiot. For most of the day, we stayed a reasonable distance from the shore of the swamp. Is the edge of a swamp called a shore? I didn't want to stay too close. The fire was kicking up fumes that made me feel sick, so we used it as a distant guide to keep direction, only moving away when a gargant came into view. I was surprised to see some of them still moving slowly among the flames. I guess I hadn't wiped out a whole ecosystem after all. Should I be pleased by that? The good news was that after roughly half an hour of walking, the fire in the swamp dwindled, revealing a vast expanse of smelly gunk once more. We found a pool of clear water trapped in a small crevasse between some rocks. I was dubious at first about drinking it, but Dog Thing didn't hesitate. Strange, back home I would never have dreamed of sharing a drink from a pool of water with a creature as mucky as Dog Thing. I guess you get used to things. We met 3 other groups of zombies that day. Fortunately, there were only 3 or 4 of them each time, all ambling along the same route. They moved slowly, so most of the time it was us catching up with them. It didn't matter that I'd fought these creatures a number of times now. I'd still nearly wet myself every time we closed in on them. I was getting better at fighting them, though, and quite proud that I was actually able to fight with both blades. Sort of. In truth, I only swung one at a time. I was too scared I'd slice my own foot off. Day 33. A second day traveling along the edge of the swamp. The area on the zombie trail side of the swamp was similar to near the shack, barely a few hundred feet of rocks and dirt, and it gave way to tall cliffs that rose up into darkness, though the rocks weren't quite so large and worn-like. Pods grew in abundance along the edge of the swamp, much more so than near the shack. Rudy pointed out that there were few gargants along the trail to eat the pods. Maybe the gargants liked to avoid the zombies. It didn't matter. It meant I had a resupply of food. My geography was completely thrown by now. All I could go on was that the swamp would eventually lead us back to the shack, which is where we decided we needed to head. There was at least some replacement equipment there. Probably not much, but even some torches and something to make a decent bag out of would help. There was, of course, the cave in the rocks, and the door. I had to go there again, just in case I'd missed something the first time. That was the plan, at least. I wish I still had my push cart. No zombie groups today. I wonder where they have gone. Day 34. No more zombies again today. I managed to collect some more water and a few more pods. We reached the shack finally. I think we kept going for close to 10 hours before eventually sighting the waterfall. It must have been that long. I was exhausted, hungry, and cold. My chest wasn't so bad today, though. Not so much coughing. I watched Dog Thing run off up towards the rocks at the edge of the plateau before I closed and blocked up the front door. A minute later, and I collapsed on the bed. There were no zombie bodies around the shack anymore. I didn't notice that until I was drifting off to sleep. Day 35. After I awoke, I spent a few hours going through my stuff and replacing what I could from the shack. There were plastic bottles and wood to make torches from. I took a blanket from the bed and made a rough sack out of one of the sheets. Dog Thing came back and was tottering around the valley for most of the day. He followed us up to the cave in the rock face and sat there waiting as I climbed up the rope. Nothing had changed up there. Not that I had expected it to. I searched around, glancing often at the rocks along one wall. Unlike the rest of the rock fall, which seemed as though it had come from the hole in the ceiling. Maybe some kind of cave-in? The rocks there looked like they had been piled up carefully. I hadn't noticed it on our first visit. Rudy sat watching the rock pile the whole time we were up there. I found a long piece of stick covered with mud lying on the ground near the refrigerator. It was thin, and it looked like someone had whittled the end away into a small hook shape.
"No more clues here, then?" said Rudy.
No, only the stick, which Adler may have used to get the compass.
"And that pile of rocks?"
Yes, the rocks.
"We're not going to disturb the grave, are we?"
No.
"Why come here, then?"
I just needed to know that what Adler wrote was true, I guess."
"I see. So, where now?"
"Well, Adler found the last compass here, so I presume he had to have been carrying it. He would have had to come back to the shack to look for the one he gave you. Of course, we know he never found that one. So he must have either gone on to get the ones in the junkyard or gone somewhere else."
"Somewhere we missed."
Okay. Well, we have to go for what we do know, and hope we find out where he went."
"Well, there is always the Warrens," said Rudy.
The Warrens?
"They run along the side of the plateau. You remember I said that the zombies don't go over the plateau. Instead, they go round. Well, that is where they go. The professor and I went that way once, following the footprint trail in the dirt that the zombies left behind. It led us all the way through and out, not too far from the mushroom fields. There are a lot of different paths in the rocks, and Adler did keep going back that way. I only went with him the once, and we stuck to the footprints. That doesn't mean he always did."
We headed back to the shack. All quiet. No zombies today. I walked down to the swamp to see if there was any sign of the fire. Nothing. Even the gargants are not around. Day 36. We set off back towards the junkyard soon after I awoke, but rather than heading back over the plateau, I took Rudy's suggestion and we made our way across the river, following the foot of the slope. I would rather have gone back across the plateau, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that the Warrens might be hiding something. Rudy was cheerful today and talkative.
"If you stand on the plateau and look down into the Warrens, it's a sheer drop, too high to clearly see any of the paths that run through the rocks. It's the way that the zombies go when they are on their way to the junkyard, but they seem to stick to one particular path, and there are hundreds of different ways."
So we can avoid the zombies by using another path?
I'm not sure we should. It would be quite easy for us to get lost down there. But saying that, I'm still curious as to what Adler was searching for down there. And he went there a lot.
We traveled past the spot where Rudy had died, and were both a bit disturbed to find that it had been messed with. Some of the ground had been churned up, and bones had moved. And I don't mean the bit that I had disturbed to get to the compass. "Maybe I should bury you."
"What?"
He looked shocked at that. I have to admit that it was a strange comment to make, considering he was standing right next to me. Well, his ghost was. "Your remains. You're kind of just... Maybe I should bury you?" I pointed at the bones that were scattered along the riverbank, overgrown with the bright, glowing grass.
"No, it's okay."
"Are you sure?"
"Yes. I don't want you to. It would be like admitting I'm dead. And I'm still here. I don't believe I'm dead yet."
That was that. Decided. Over the riverbank, the ground sloped downwards, past the rocks, and then flattened out into a rough, open plain littered with small stones and debris. The grass gradually thinned out and was replaced by hard, cracked ground that was covered in a kind of salty sand. It reminded me of some pictures I'd once seen in National Geographic of the Gobi Desert. Dog Thing was waiting for us where the rocks ended and plains began. I like to think that somehow he knew where we were heading. We stayed along the edge of the plain, near where the plateau rose up higher and higher, in a sheer wall of marble, until I could no longer see the top. Across the barren ground, in long trailing lines, were sets of footprints. Rudy said that not even the storm and the rain managed to touch anything here, so the footprints were still there from the times that he and Adler had traveled through the Warrens, all those years ago. It was eerie seeing a small, thin bicycle track cutting into the ground. I was excited by it at first, thinking that maybe it was a clue of some sort, but Rudy pointed out that Adler had always taken the bike with him, so the tire tracks could well have been quite old. Littered across the ground here and there were bones and junk. I didn't examine any of it long enough to figure out what kind of creature the bones belonged to, but they looked like they had been there for a long time. We got to the Warrens a lot quicker than I expected. I would say about an hour across the plain, so only a few miles. They came into view through the mist and were so eerie that I almost stopped and turned back. I don't know how they were formed, but they didn't look natural. Sheer walls, maybe 40 feet high, lined a dozen entrances. The rock arched at the top, almost like it had been cut from the stone by a machine. The paths were all roughly 20 feet across, and the same thin, salty sand lay on the ground. The mist that covered everywhere made the entrances even more foreboding. I saw where the zombie trail continued into the Warrens before we even reached it. It wasn't hard to spot. A path that was maybe 10 feet across, that looked like it had been worn away over many years by thousands of pairs of feet, stretched across the plain and entered the tunnel nearest to us. There were no zombies in sight, but I didn't like how deeply cut into the ground the trail was. "I'm hoping that we won't be using that path," I said, pointing at the trail.
"Unfortunately, we will. We have to follow the same path at least most of the way. I think we might get lost otherwise."
But something we both noticed almost at the same time changed that. A short distance from the entrance, a bicycle track crossed the zombie trail and led into the third tunnel. I looked closer. The track seemed as though it had been used a lot of times.
"We never went that way,"
said Rudy. "Do you think Adler found another route?" I asked.
"He must have, but he never mentioned it."
I was still nervous going in there. No open ground and not a lot of choices when it came to escaping if we came across anything. The dog thing wasn't growling and didn't seem disturbed, so I followed Rudy into the third entrance. I was expecting hours of wandering around, lost, but about an hour later, after following the bicycle trail, we were looking down into a gully that ended in a sheer wall. The tracks led down to the very bottom, where another metal door was built into the rock, a door that was open. We looked at each other, puzzled. Leaning against the rock only a few feet away from the door was an old, rusty bicycle.
"The professor's bicycle,"
said Rudy as we approached the door. There was no light coming from inside, just pitch darkness. Rudy knelt down next to the bicycle and tried to wipe away some of the dust and sand that had gathered on it. His hand went straight through. "Well, I guess that answers where he went."
"Yes, I suppose it does, almost."
"He must have come here a lot if all these footprints are anything to go by," I replied, indicating all the different footprint trails coming to and from the entrance. Most of them came from the path opposite the one we had arrived by. Why so many visits? I moved the bicycle away from the wall. Years of gathered dust and sand fell from it. It had been here so long that both the chain and the steering column had seized up. The bicycle may have been ancient even back when the professor had used it, so the cracked paint and rust weren't much of a gauge to go by. Rudy stood there, peering at the doorway. I could see he was reluctant to go inside.
"I don't know whether I want to see what's in there."
I nodded my understanding. "It's okay, I'll go."
No, I'll go first. Safety and all that, it makes sense. Just give me a moment."
I took my time lighting up one of my newly made chair leg torches and waited quietly by the door. I knew the torch wouldn't last as long as the others. I'd had no cloth to wrap round the top and no petrol to soak it in. Ironic, really, since I'd probably burned thousands of gallons of fuel in the swamp fire. It didn't matter, though. This was Rudy's friend we were expecting to find dead inside the door unless it led somewhere else. I was hoping it did. After a minute or so, Rudy stepped through the doorway. His own glow filled the corridor that was revealed, casting dim shadows over the broken furniture that littered the ground and the cobwebs that hung from the ceiling. I thought that was a bit odd, having not seen a single spider the entire time I had been here. Dog Thing didn't follow us in, but he also didn't seem on edge. There were 3 doors along the left side of the corridor, all of which were open, and then a dead end, with another door in it that was shut. The door at the end looked almost identical to the door in the cave near the shack. Rudy was standing in the corridor, not moving, so I decided it was down to me to look after all. The first room was no larger than a decent-sized bedroom, containing little apart from a row of turned-over filing cabinets, all of which were empty. More cobwebs filled the dark corners of the room, and the floor was littered with rotten books and piles of folders. I picked up the nearest folder and opened it, but the pages inside crumbled to dust in my hands. The second room along was the same, except the cabinets, again empty, were still standing against the far wall. There was also a stack of tables and chairs in one corner. We found him in the last room, sitting upright, facing an aged computer screen that was still plugged into the wall. Where the hell the electricity had come from originally, I don't know. The plug was hanging by one rusted wire that clung to the concrete wall. The screen of the computer had been broken in a long time ago. Adler had been dead for a long time, so long that there wasn't a shred of flesh left on him, just a decaying skeleton inside a smart gray dress suit. There was a hat sitting on the side of the computer desk, caked in years of dust and grime, yet more cobwebs covered the walls, the desk, and Adler. Rudy recognized the hat and suit immediately, walked over to the body, and knelt down with his head bowed. I didn't need to ask, but I did anyway. "It's him, isn't it?" Rudy nodded. "I'm really sorry, Rudy," was all I could think of to say. After a few minutes, Rudy stood and began searching the room. I joined him. I couldn't think of anything else to say that might make Rudy feel any better, so I got on with the task, finding the compass, the key. I was about to open the front of Adler's suit jacket, hoping to find the key dangling on a necklace round his neck, when the apparition came through the wall. A second before it appeared, I heard Dog Thing growling down the corridor. I felt a tingling sensation run down the back of my neck, and then it was there, right in front of me. I have never been so terrified in my life. I've probably said that a few times since starting this journal, and meant it each time, but this was the kind of fear that made me run for my life. Rudy as well. It came out of the wall, screaming a high-pitched screech that was ear-piercing. I couldn't understand anything that it was babbling at me apart from, "Get away!" It was vaguely human, or at least I thought it could be if it wasn't flailing itself in a way that made it too blurry to see. Its eyes burned with hate and madness. So I ran as fast as I could, tripping twice as I dashed out of the room, down the passageway, and out of the door, to the sloped opening that led up to the Warrens. It was right at my back the whole way. I only couldn't feel its touch, just the coldness that swept around me as it flailed its arms trying to grab hold of me. Without watching where I was going, I sprinted up the slope back towards the Warrens, straight past the 2 zombies that were making their way along the path toward us. I briefly stumbled sideways to avoid them and saw Rudy do the same. Then the most god-awful noise pierced the air. I stumbled again and fell forwards, landing on my back. I felt one of the blades hanging at my side nearly pierce my leg and rolled over onto my back. About 20 feet away, the apparition had stopped. It was no longer chasing us. Instead, it was busy tearing apart the 2 zombies. It was over in seconds. The zombies lurched away from it, fearful like I was. They no fear? It didn't matter. The glowing, screaming apparition tore them both apart like they were made of paper. Dog Thing had been busy during all of this, As I got back up to my feet, I could see him backing away from the apparition, leaving the remains of the other zombie on the ground. I didn't notice until afterwards that Dog Thing had killed 3 other zombies, leaving only the 2 standing as we came rushing out of the door. The apparition stopped screaming and flailing and walked towards us, halting about 10 feet away. It tried to move forward again, but appeared to be blocked in some way. It stood there watching us. I was stunned, completely unable to decide what to do.
"Adler?"
asked Rudy. The apparition looked up and stared at Rudy.
"Do I know you, thief?"
it said, its voice harsh and angry.
"Yes, it's me, John. It's Rudy. Don't you remember me?"
Rudy. That does sound familiar. Were we friends once?
Rudy glanced at me worriedly.
"Yes, for many years. You don't remember?"
Of course I remember you, you old fool, but you are dead. I saw you dead. You are gone. You are no more alive than those pathetic creatures.
"Yes, I'm dead, sort of."
Stop talking to me. You can't be here. You died.
I stayed quiet during all this and took out my blades, watching the 2 paths for more zombies. They had followed us, surely.
"Just as you did," said Rudy.
What? How ridiculous. I'm not dead.
"But you are, like me. You are a ghost."
Maybe so, but you are a thief, Rudy Shevchenko, and there is no excuse for such rude behavior.
"But how? I haven't taken anything."
Adler glared at him.
You know what you were going to take, though, don't you? Well, no one shall have it. I will not allow that creature to find them again.
"We don't want Cutter Jack to."
Don't say its name! Damn you, you fool! Don't you know it can hear you?
"It can?"
Yes. Everywhere you go, anything you say, it can hear the living. It can read their thoughts and know what they are planning. Hear their breathing, their heartbeat, everything.
My turn to cut in. So that's how the zombies are finding us. Adler turned and glared at me this time.
Yes, boy. It knows exactly what you are planning. And now it knows what you are searching for.
But you led us to look for them. Your diary.
My diary. I was a fool, forever searching for them only, trying to keep it secret and hoping for a way to escape this hell of a place. My foolishness and my hurry caused my end.
Adler turned and walked back to the door. We followed, but with every step I was wary of him turning on us again. I looked at Dog Thing, hoping to get some indication of any danger, but he was just sitting there a few feet from the entrance. Adler was standing, staring at his own skeleton when I stepped into the room. He looked up briefly. Rudy was bursting into questions.
"How did you find the door? You never mentioned it."
I didn't find it while you were still alive, Rudy. It was long after. I used the pass through the Warrens a lot after you died. I can't be completely sure of it, but right after I found you dead, I traveled across the plateau. He was there. It was there. I sensed him, but could not see him. He knew where I was. So after that, I took to using the path through the Warrens, hiding whenever his creations wandered past. Every time I tried to get to the trash yard or to the bus, I could sense him. I could feel that he was there. That fear stopped me from trying to leave for weeks.
"Zombies?" said Rudy.
Pardon?
"They're called zombies, his creatures."
They are? Oh, interesting. Finally a name to the abominations. Anyway, as I was saying, I used the route through the Warrens a lot. Trying to find a way through that felt safe. Then one day I came upon a set of tracks that hadn't been there before, along one of the paths that the zombies didn't use. There were many tracks, so I followed them and found myself outside this place.
Adler sat down on the desk next to his skeleton.
The entrance was closed when I got here, but the footprints led straight to it, and I knew they were not old. Otherwise, I would have seen them before. I set up camp in the rocks above the path and waited for days. Nothing. So I traveled again back to the swamp to gather provisions. How I hated those pod things, but not as much as mushrooms.
You never did take to the cuisine here,
said Rudy, laughing. Adler shot him a sour look. Don't call it cuisine. The filth that grows here is anything but that. Adler sighed. Well, when I came back here, hoping maybe to try and open it again on my way to collect the keys, I was too hasty. The door was already open, you see. I went in too quickly, didn't think. I was so excited, like a little boy walking into a toy shop. The door was open, and I could hear movement, voices.
What happened?
They shot me.
Shot you? Who?
I never found out who they were. They were armed with guns. Strange guns, the likes of which I had never seen before. Their clothing, it was like something out of the future or the past, gray armor of some kind. The door at the back was open, too. I think they were leaving. The last of them turned round, and as I was calling out in welcome, he leveled his weapon at me and fired. That's all I can remember. I suppose I must have dragged myself back to this room and sat down somehow.
That's terrible. They didn't even stop to find out who you were?
No, I think they presumed I was a zombie.
You found the fourth compass, though?
Yes. It was up near the other entrance outside the door. That creature must have killed someone up there. What I don't understand is why the body was buried. Would never have buried the man. Someone else must have buried it.
The armored people?
Maybe.
You've seen outside. You saw it when they had the door open.
The professor laughed at this.
Oh, Rudy, you've been like that. Like this longer than I have, and you haven't figured some things out? Walls are no barrier to you now, my friend.
Yes, I do know, but
Rudy, I have been sitting outside in the sun for years now.
Outside? In the sun?
Yes. Come with me now.
We went out into the passage, and the professor walked towards the door at the back. He didn't stop, just went right through the door. It puzzled me. Why hadn't he walked through the wall in the room if there were no barriers, instead of going into the corridor? Habit?
Come on, my old friend. Come and see the world outside of our dark prison.
Rudy looked at me for a moment.
I will come back.
Then he stepped through the door. I knelt down and peered through the gap underneath. It was almost exactly like the other door. The gap was no more than a few inches. I saw it. The fourth compass. It was a few feet away, lying on the rock floor. If I could reach it, all that would remain was the one in the safe. They came back through the door a few minutes later. Rudy looked different, and not in a healthy way. He looked sad. My turn for questions. What's out there? Rudy shook his head.
Only endless desert. I hope for something else. But at least I've seen the sun for the first time in years.
The key. It's out there, outside, I said.
Yes, again, I don't know how or when I put it there, or if it was even me. The first thing I remember after the pain of the shot was waking up sitting outside in the sun.
So barren, said Rudy. So desolate. I'd hoped that London was outside the door, at least somewhere familiar.
Ah, but we are not somewhere familiar, are we, my old friend? This is not Earth. I figured that out a long time ago. But at least the sun shines out there.
I wished I could have seen the sun again. It took me at least an hour to get the compass. I pulled apart bits of furniture and tried poking it through the gap.
Eventually I managed to drag the damn thing back within reaching distance. I could hear the two of them talking in the room with the computer, but wasn't paying attention. I probably should have been. No doubt Adler had a lot of things to say that would be important. Adler was bound to the compass, just as Rudy was. He couldn't explain how. He had numerous ideas about trapped souls and their spirits having nowhere to go. Most of his ideas seemed like fairy tales to me. Are ghosts magnetic? Compasses don't draw things to them, do they? Surely it should have been the other way around. We left quickly. I took the professor's hat. He insisted I keep hold of that. Not sure why. It wasn't like he was ever going to be able to wear it again. There was also a small rucksack full of his stuff. I turned it upside down and left the contents on the floor. There was nothing useful. But it was a stroke of luck to have something to put my things in again. One thing that was handy, though. There was a small bottle filled with oil of some kind. Adler was reluctant to leave the bicycle behind, and finally convinced me to use some of the oil on it and push it along, at least for a while. I agreed, even though I didn't think there was any point. It seems that I was wrong. After a few hundred yards, most of the dust and crap that had built up simply broke off, and the wheels and chains were turning again. I still wasn't quite ready to try riding it. Further into the warrens was where Adler took us, all the time chattering away. It was nice to see Rudy full of spirit again. By the way he was going on, I even thought he was raring for our next encounter with the zombies. I guess I'll never understand that bit, being potential zombie food myself, but I figured that being dead didn't give you too many perks. So I couldn't begrudge his enthusiasm at discovering that he was an untouchable zombie killer. When I think about it, it was handy. I could sleep knowing that I had a demon guard dog and 2 ghosts that never needed to sleep watching over me, all 3 of which were utterly deadly as far as zombies were concerned. Adler hadn't figured out why he was so lethal to zombies.
"I don't even feel them," he said. "There were a few of them loitering around outside the door when I first became aware that I was still here. I was confused, staring down at my own body as it died. I walked outside, and in my frustration, I tried to attack the nearest one. I don't know how or why it works, but it does. They can't touch me, but I can destroy them. I don't physically tear them apart. They sort of just fall apart at the seams."
We found a small alcove further into the warrens a few hours later. It was only a short climb up some rocks. Adler said he'd used it several times. The zombies couldn't get up there. Only one more compass to get now, and thankfully Adler told us where the key to the safe was hidden. I laughed until I was almost in tears when he told me. Talk about irony. It was one of the keys hanging in the ignition of the bus. Day 37. Is it really 37 days since I got here? Every time I write the day in this journal now, it seems like an eternity. I feel like I've been here much longer, which worries me. What if I end up stuck here for years like Rudy and Adler? That's not the plan, I know. If I get out of here and I take the compasses with me, hopefully my ghost friends will go with me. What happens to them wherever we end up next, I don't know. I don't think either of them cares, so long as it isn't an eternity stuck in this place. We spent nearly the entire day heading through the warrens, and I camped out again in another nook up in the rocks. The trail was easy to follow, and I wouldn't have needed directions. The footprints and bicycle trail left in the dirt long ago by Adler seemed quite permanent, which wasn't promising as far as water was concerned. I didn't have many bottles left. The entrance to the warrens came out not far from where I'd first stepped up onto the plateau, about half a mile of walking across the open rocky ground, and I saw the rocks that lined the bottom of the slope. I was missing the glowing grass already. Dog Thing went all hyper as soon as we left the warrens. I guess that we were back on his home ground now, barely a mile through the mushrooms to reach the bus. You know, I don't think Adler and Rudy stopped talking even once during the whole time. You would have thought they were 2 old friends, still alive, and just out for a walk in the park somewhere instead of two ghosts. We stopped at the foot of the slope. Adler was paranoid about Cutter Jack being around, even though it had been years since he'd been here.
I don't think he is here. At least I can't sense him, like I could before. But that doesn't mean we should be rash. He could be anywhere, waiting.
Or he could be back at his home, wherever that is, still licking his wound. Adler laughed.
Yes, Drew. How did you manage that? I still can't get my mind around it. You actually injured it?
Luck and clumsiness, I replied. I wouldn't have stood a chance if Rudy hadn't come running through the door at that moment.
Plus, I think the maw had given him one hell of a battering before he got to the door, said Rudy. He could quite probably have already been injured.
Yes, said Adler. He is wary of the maw, and rightfully so. I have seen first-hand what they are capable of. Well, so have you.
I looked over at Dog Thing and wondered again why such a creature had decided to become my friend. I picked up the pace a bit, and soon we were walking through mushrooms again, following the marker poles. I had too many questions for Adler, so many that I couldn't remember half of them. Did you ever find out who put these markers here?
No, though I did repair a few that had fallen down. They are old, I know that much. I can only suspect that this place has had people coming through it for a long time. Well, there is evidence all around us, is there not? The junkyard, the city, buildings dotted all over the place that have been run down for what might be centuries. It has puzzled me for years. Were they made here, or are they like other things brought here by some mysterious occurrence?
I think they were brought here, I replied. It's all too random. Take the city, for example. It just starts. There's no reason for the roads to be where they are. It's almost like they were once attached to other roads and still should be, but a chunk of it was picked up and dumped right there. Adler was nodding.
Exactly my point.
Even some of the roads are broken up, where a rock underneath has pushed them up. Rock doesn't do that, does it? Tree roots I can understand, but a rock pushing its way up through the road seems too odd to me.
Yes, indeed, and the building on the edge of the swamp. Have you noticed that they are sitting on top of a sandbank? I looked. In one of the cellars, the walls have collapsed and sand has poured in. Who builds foundations into sand when there is solid rock only a few feet away?
We camped out in pretty much exactly the same spot that Dog Thing and I had used on our trek through the mushroom field the first time, underneath the giant mushrooms. I'm almost certain that I slept under the same one. It seems so long since we made that journey, like it was years ago. It's hard to believe that it has only been a few weeks. Day 38. The weirdest thing happened. I awoke hours later having had another dream, the first in days. Adler and Rudy were sitting over near the marker pole a few yards away. Dog Thing was underneath one of the mushrooms. He was sleeping, I think, though I don't know if he ever really sleeps the way people do. It started raining again, just like that. One moment ominous silence, and the next moment there was torrential rain, just as it had been the last time we passed this way. Yes, last time it had been drizzling for a day or so before, but the torrential downpour had happened while we had been under the mushrooms. In the dream I was walking round a house. It was not a place that I had been to before, though it seemed familiar somehow. There was no furniture in any of the rooms, like it had been cleaned out before sale. The walls in every room were painted white, and there were no curtains at the windows. I happened to glance out of one of the windows on the top floor, and saw that there was scaffolding everywhere. The oddest thing. I went downstairs to find the front door so that I could go outside, but there was no front door. I walked all the way round the ground floor of the house, and there were no doors leading outside. There were 3 floors to the house, and the front door was at the top. There was only one large room up there, and in that room, tucked into the corner, was a small dressing table with a mirror. Someone was sitting on the chair facing the mirror. I spoke, but there was no answer. Then I found out why. The person in the chair was dead, and had been for a long time. I stood there, puzzled for a while, and then I recognized the dead man's clothing. It was me. That was when I woke up. I didn't get back to sleep. The noise from the rain was so loud. I lay there for a while, drifting in and out, but didn't manage to drop off again. I think I may have been drifting into a deep sleep when all hell broke loose. They even took Dog Thing by surprise, but he was up and tearing into them before I was even fully conscious and aware of what was going on. Adler and Rudy ran past me as I stumbled and tried to find my blades. My blades? They had somehow become mine now, no longer stolen from Cutter Jack. It must have been the rain that obscured their sound, or their smell, in Dog Thing's case. It had to be that. He normally sensed zombies approaching before they were anywhere near us, and it wasn't like it was just one or two stumbling slowly through the mushrooms. There were hundreds. Adrenaline finally kicked in, and I was up, throwing my rucksack over my shoulders. With a blade in each hand, I ran towards where the others were now furiously battling the mass of zombies. I slowed down as I got near and made my way closer to Dog Thing. Unlike Rudy and Adler, who were now running through the horde, throwing themselves about and knocking down zombies every few steps, I was not going to get trapped in among them. The first one that got past Dog Thing and came shuffling towards me was the nastiest I had seen yet. How the thing managed to stay held together, I don't know. Cutter Jack must have been in a particularly cruel mood when he created this one. Instead of legs, it walked on 6 hands, all of which were attached to the back of the first poor soul. On top of this were 2 other torsos, each with a head and no arms. Where the legs had gone, I don't know. I stepped backwards and waited for it to get closer, pulled back both of my blades and swung the first, then the second. All 3 heads screamed at me furiously, and it tried to grab my legs, toppling itself over in the process. I was nearly sick, but still managed to get in 2 more stabs before I backed off and saw the thing writhe on the floor for a moment. It reached out one hand in my direction before finally collapsing. There were too many. It didn't matter how many Dog Thing, Adler, and Rudy were killing, more were appearing to take their place. But as much as I shouted, Adler and Rudy carried on. Dog Thing took notice of me, though, and was following me as I slowly backed away. Then, without warning, Adler stopped fighting. He was looking around. I think he was trying to find Rudy, but spotted me first.
"Get out of here!"
shouted Adler.
"Get to the bus! Lock yourself in! They can't hurt us!"
I ran for Adler's bicycle and leapt onto it, hoping to God that it wouldn't fall apart on me. The last time I had ridden a bicycle, I had been about 12 years old, so the first thing I did was fall off it. 10 yards was how far I got, and then crash, straight into one of the larger mushrooms. Dog Thing tore into a zombie a few feet away, and I hauled myself back onto the bicycle and pushed off as another zombie reached out to grab me. Then I was away, riding as fast as I could through the mushrooms, on a bicycle that I thought would fall apart at any moment. But it didn't. I reached another marker, and then slowed down, stopping for breath. Adler and Rudy were standing about 100 feet away, facing the direction that we had come. Of course, I'd somehow forgotten that my leaving would drag them away from the fight. Dog Thing padded over and sat down a few yards away, panting. The break was short-lived as a single zombie staggered into view, and then another. These ones were moving faster than normal. I don't know why. Maybe Cutter Jack's experiments had yielded better results with these few. Dog Thing turned and growled. "No, leave them," I said, and started cycling away again. Thankfully, Dog Thing did leave them. I think Rudy and Adler would quite happily have dealt with them, but I wanted the hell out of there. I didn't ride as fast this time. Dog Thing could move damn fast when he wanted to, so that wasn't a problem. But I was losing my sense of direction. Thankfully, Rudy spotted another marker, and we picked up the pace again, forced onwards by the presence of the zombies that would appear through the mist every time I slowed down. After an hour of this, I was beginning to tire. My legs were screaming at me. I'd forgotten how much work riding a bicycle was. I protested when Rudy ordered me to stop and rest for a few minutes, but I couldn't really argue, although I had become a little more resilient after living here for over a month. I was still no athlete, and this was pushing it. We'd reached the junkyard at last, or at least the start of it, and I collapsed next to the first pile of junk that I saw. I smiled. A few yards was the familiar pile of bicycles and prams that I had built, which meant we weren't far from the bus. We'd left the zombies behind, even the faster ones, so I walked, leaning on the bicycle. I know it would have been much easier to ride if the ground hadn't been so uneven and muddy. Plus, my legs felt like jelly. A while later, we reached the bus. The relief of seeing it looming in the darkness was short-lived, though. Something had been waiting for us. There, sitting on its haunches at the back of the bus, was a creature I had not seen before, but I knew what it was immediately. The gray, lizard-like skin was stretched taut over its powerful frame. It was larger than Dog Thing, much larger, and as close to a cross between a panther and a crocodile as you could get. I stopped in my tracks, dropped the bicycle, and reached for my blades as it stood up and stretched its legs casually. Dog Thing growled, and the creature answered with a hiss. So, this was the mysterious species that had been killed in the storeroom at the back of the shop. That meant it was killable. But it didn't help much when it was bounding towards me, its massive jaw opening to reveal rows of teeth that would make a shark envious. Dog Thing leapt at its throat, but the creature reared up and batted him aside with one of its massive paws, sending him hurtling away over a pile of junk to disappear into the darkness with a crash. I stood my ground, crouching, hoping desperately that somehow these two blades would be enough to hurt the creature. Adler and Rudy ran past me, charging at it, but they fell straight through it. This was no unliving abomination that could be hurt by ghosts. Their attempt did slow it down, though, but only for a moment. It jumped at me, and I lashed out in return, feeling the flat of the blade hit its skin and deflect off as I was thrown to the floor. Then it was on me. One massive paw pushed against my chest, crushing my ribs. It looked down at me and bared its teeth, but it just stayed there. Why hadn't it killed me? Then I heard the footsteps behind me and saw a long, pale hand pick up the blade that lay on the floor next to me.
I told you I would find you, little rat.
As Cutter Jack stood over me, I saw his face for the first time. If I thought that zombies were hideous, they were nothing compared to what stared back at me out of that hood. I knew at that moment that Cutter Jack was no human and never had been. He was too alien, too grotesque to have been one of his own experiments. Everything about his face said death. His skin was pale, almost transparent, and a mass of scars, though there were no veins visible underneath. His features were twisted as though they had been carved up and sewn back together many times. He had only one visible eye, blackened and bloodshot. The other was sewn over, crossed by a stitched scar that ran from his pointed chin to the top of his forehead. But no surgeon had made these stitches. Instead, metal staples stuck out every inch or so along the opening, and between them I could see the gray bone of his skull, cracked and rotten where the staples had been forced in. The skin around his mouth was drawn back and taut, showing rows of sharpened, bloody teeth. Where his nose should have been, there was just a gaping hole, split by a small, sharp sliver of bone. My senses were assaulted by a rank, musty stench that somehow spoke to me of death that was far older than anything I had ever known. There was something in those eyes that I will remember always, a malevolence that hated not only what it was seeing, but possibly everything living that had ever existed. This was the creature that now stood over me, his pet, pinning me to the ground with a force that I was unable to resist. He was even taller than I had first thought, easily over 8 feet in height, probably closer to 9. His body was thin and gaunt, like a ragged skeleton, over which the darkest, dirtiest clothing was hung. He leaned closer to me so that his face was barely inches from mine, stared me straight in the face, and smiled. There was no warmth in that smile. It was a smile of victory, the kind that only the most wicked of hunters saves for taunting his helpless victims before ending them. I wondered if that was what I was about to become, and whether it would last very long. Was I about to become a plaything? A toy to torture? Was my fate the same as all those countless abominations that walked the dark mists of this place? Part of me longed at that moment for it to be all over. Do with me as you please, I thought. I have had enough of running now.
Be still,
he hissed. I did as I was told, but then I realized he wasn't talking to me. He was commanding the lizard creature. A lizard cat that had me pinned to the ground. It lifted its paw off my chest, but still bared its razor-sharp metallic teeth at me. I coughed and drew a sharp breath in. Then Cutter's attention was on me again.
I think you have something that is mine, little rat,
he rasped, his voice rattling like his lungs were filled with water or with blood. He reached down and pulled at my shirt, searching for the compasses that had slipped and now dug into my back. But then he stopped and stood up, suddenly distracted. His smug grin vanished, replaced by suspicion, his one eye squinting as he looked around. Something had disturbed him, something I couldn't sense.
Give me the keys quickly, or I will end you,
he said, pointing the blade at my chest. There was urgency in his voice now, and I felt the blade pierce my skin. I gritted my teeth against the pain as I felt a warm trickle of blood run across my ribs and down my side. Took every bit of will that I could muster to not breathe in and force myself to lie still. It was the only way I could avoid being impaled on the blade. The lizard cat whined and growled, standing around frantically. It began to back away from us. I heard an answering hiss from over near the bus, and my heart sank as at least a dozen more lizard cats bound round the corner, spreading out in a circle around us, hissing and spitting as they glared into the darkness. Something was coming. They could sense it. Cutter Jack could sense it, and now even I could feel the change in the air. Cutter Jack pulled his blade back, but still kept it aimed at me. He glanced around again, shifting irritably as the lizard cats around us shuffled and twitched, peering in every direction. He looked down at me.
Rat, give me the key now,
he shouted, but then he suddenly looked away, dropped into a crouch, and lifted his blades up in defense. Whatever it was that was coming right now, and I didn't want to see the thing that could scare Cutter Jack and his lizards. A flash of fur rocketed across the gap between us and the nearest junk pile. It moved at a speed that made my heart leap. The maw shot through the gap between two lizard cats before either of them could even react. Instead, they moved moments after it passed, snapping at an empty space, as the maw went directly for Cutter Jack, leaping high and straight at his throat. But this time, Cutter Jack was fast and ducked down just in time, swinging his blade quicker than my eyes could even follow. The maw went hurtling by to latch onto one of the lizard cats with its teeth. I heard a ripping noise as it tore a massive gouge in the creature's back as it went by. The lizard cat stumbled and spun around, lashing out with its claws and screeching in anger, but the maw was gone, speeding off into the darkness, lost from view in the mist. I had only the briefest of glances at it before it vanished, but I knew that neither blade nor claw had touched it. My heart began to beat faster. Hope. That was all I could think of. If a maw was willing to risk its life to try and help me, then there had to be a chance, even the slightest chance that I could escape. And I owed it at least an attempt. Another flash of fur, this time from a different direction, and another lizard cat screeched as it was struck. Then another, and another. There was more than one maw, maybe many. I had no real way of knowing. They appeared struck, and were gone before I could make out any discerning features. Again and again the maw made attacks upon Cutter Jack's pets, disappearing a moment later back into the mist, before any of my captors could react. The lizard cats flew into a rage as one after another they were bowled over and mauled. They shifted around, confused and seemingly dazed, helpless to stop the attacks, and even snapping at each other. I looked up at Cutter Jack. His attention was not on me. I knew then that he didn't even consider me to be a threat, and I knew that I would only have this one chance. Now was the time, if ever there was going to be one. If I tried to escape, tried to run out of this circle of my enemies, then I would probably die. But that didn't mean I was going to lie there and hope that the maw would rescue me. In one desperate last attempt to stay alive, I took a deep breath and lashed out, kicking Cutter Jack in the leg, hoping that it was his injured one. I gave it everything I had, even though my own legs were still weak from riding the bicycle, and my whole body fought against it. I struck him, and I knew it was hard. Thud. I was lucky. He howled and stumbled away, hobbling for a moment before spitting at me and pulling his blade back, ready to strike. He advanced again, jumping forward, but his injured leg faltered. I was ready, stumbling to my feet and grabbing the other blade, which had been underneath me the whole time. I lashed out at him, but missed as he stepped back so that the blade cut through empty space. We were both up now, facing each other, barely 10 feet apart. How I ever believed for even the briefest of moments that I could stand there and actually fight him, I don't know. But there was something waking up inside me, and it said that I could do it. I would keep him at bay if he came at me. I would fight him off long enough for the maw to decimate his pets. Cutter Jack stared at me, warily watching the blade in my hand. Then Adler and Rudy were by my side, yelling and screaming at him. I knew they couldn't help me, but did Cutter Jack know that? It seemed not. He backed away and looked around at the chaos. The first lizard cat, the one that had first knocked me down, jumped out of the way, glaring at the ghosts warily. They hadn't scared it the first time, but I guessed that it had never seen its master show any sign of weakness. It started to back away.
Get back here!
Cutter Jack cursed, but the lizard cat still backed away even further, edging towards the bus. Stay calm. Hold your ground. Don't back away. The voice in my head was back again. Then I saw Cutter Jack's one eye open wide. He was staring straight at me. No, not at me, and not at my ghost friend. Something else, something that was behind me. Then he was backing off, moving quickly past the bus, taking off at a run. His lizard pets broke away from their guard and bounded along to catch up with him. I didn't understand. Even with the help of the few maw that were hounding them, I would quite probably be dead if he had decided to come for me.
This is not over.
Cutter Jack yelled as he vanished from view into the junkyard. Then I heard the growls behind me and turned round to see what he had seen before he fled, what it was that had frightened even this most deadly of monsters. Cutter Jack had not been the only one waiting for me at the junkyard. The maw had arrived, and I don't mean the few that had caused disarray with the lizard cats. There were scores, maybe even hundreds, so many that I wouldn't even try to count them. They jumped over the piles of junk and poured in from the mists around us. At their lead, a few feet away, was my dog thing, a little shaken but still fighting fit. Several of them broke off from the main group and sped past me at an astonishing speed. I could tell that they were the ones who had made the attacks earlier. They were different to the maw I had seen so far, different to Dog Thing. These maw were larger, quicker, deadlier, their fur almost black, and their eyes even larger than Dog Thing's. They vanished a moment later into the mists, in the same direction that Cutter Jack and his pets had gone. I collapsed on the floor, dropping my blade and holding my chest. The lizard cat had nearly crushed me. My chest was tight with pain, and I found it difficult to breathe without it hurting. Broken ribs, maybe. I reached inside my shirt to where the wound was, and was relieved to find that it was only the slightest of cuts. It wouldn't need cleaning, somehow, but if I didn't let it get dirty and infected, it should heal.
Are you injured?
It was Adler leaning down over me. I'm okay. I'll be okay. I was gasping for breath. I just need a moment. My ribs feel like a car rammed into me. After a few minutes, I got up slowly and headed over to the bus. Around me, the maw were spreading out, surrounding the whole area. Far away, back towards the mushrooms, the noise of a furious fight drifted towards us. The screams of zombies mixed with the growling and barks of the maw. I could hear howling from the junkyard, where I imagined the maw were prowling and hunting, seeking out Cutter Jack and his pets. I had a sense that they had not caught him. A war was raging around me, and how different this place seemed to me when I had first been here those many days ago. It had been so quiet, so barren and void of life, and now all around me the noise of fighting. I couldn't help but feel that in little more than a month I had turned this surreal, chaotic world into even more chaos. I stumbled onto the bus and leaned over into the driver's cab. The keys were still in the ignition, which surprised me.
"It's that one,"
said Adler, pointing to a small bronze key dangling on the loop among a dozen other keys. I pulled them out of the ignition, deciding that it might be better to take them all in case the others had a use. I was confused. "Adler, you said you thought he could hear all of our thoughts and know what we were planning. Well, how come this key is still here if he knows what it opens? Surely he would have read that from my mind." Adler was nodding.
"Yes, I believe it was so. But this does suggest that maybe he isn't quite as omniscient as I thought. I was rather confused when we first met. It had been so long since I'd seen anyone else."
"Then he may not know everything."
"Indeed, this is good news, is it not?"
"Yes, of course. If he had known that the safe key was here, it wouldn't be here anymore, and he would already have the safe open, and the last key would be his."
"Which means that unless he has managed to break open the safe, the last compass should still be there. Let's go."
I stepped off the bus, grabbed my bag, and started hobbling off towards the junkyard.
"Are you leaving the bicycle?"
asked Adler. I'd forgotten about it, but was glad that Adler hadn't. It made a usable crutch of sorts, taking some of my weight as I moved slowly along. There was no way I was going to ride it again, at least not for now, but I was able to hang my pack over it. Rudy caught up with me. He looked concerned.
"You don't need to rest. That was quite a fight, and you took a battering."
"I'm good. And we are too close. Plus, we have the maw with us now. We don't have time to mess around. Every minute or hour we give him means another ambush or something worse. I can't let him have the time to plot."
"But there's no point if you collapse before we get there."
"I'll be fine." In truth, I felt dizzy and sick, but I was determined to go on. Rudy was about to protest further, but Adler shook his head.
"James is right. We need to do this now, especially while he has the protection of the maw."
Almost as though they knew what to do, the maw broke off from their guard perimeter and split into packs, moving with us, patrolling down all of the different paths through the piles of junk that we passed. I couldn't believe how many of them there were. Hundreds, it seemed. It was as though they had known that something important was about to happen, and had come from all over to be there. There were maw of all sizes. This wasn't just a pack of fighting dogs. They had brought their young as well. On the edge of visibility, I saw a large group of the huge, black-furred ones, herding an even bigger pack of tiny maw, some no bigger than a cat. I smiled at this. Maw puppies. It was then that it clicked. I had never considered it before. I had always presumed that the maw had come from here, that they were natives, and that they belonged here like every other strange thing that I had encountered. But what if they weren't? What if they were the same as us, lost and trapped here? It seemed obvious to me now. They simply wanted to escape this place like we did. That had to be it. It explained so much. Why else would such creatures befriend me when there was so little for them to fear in this place? I always knew that there had to be a reason, and now here they all were, gathered around me, probably the entire pack, going wherever it was that we were heading. Somehow they must have known that we were making a break for an exit, a way out, and they wanted out too. Without the fear of bumping into zombies or Cutter Jack, we moved fast. I was in a lot of pain, but leaning on the bicycle helped. We soon arrived at my old camp. After over a month, here I was, right back where I had started. There were already fresh zombie kills littering the area. The ground was covered in destroyed bodies, right where the safe poked out from the top of a junk pile. There were several dozen maw lying around the place, licking their paws and scratching their fur like Dog Thing always did after a fight with a zombie. I looked behind me. Dog Thing was still right there, a couple of feet away. He was sticking closer to me now than ever before.
Cutter Jack knew something was here,
said Adler. I frowned. It was strange to hear Adler say our enemy's name. I guessed that the professor had thrown away the idea that his thoughts were being read.
Or he knew that James had been here, said Rudy.
Ah, yes, well thought of, Rudy. It makes perfect sense for him to cover every possibility.
I climbed up onto the junk and made my way over to where the safe still sat. Some of the maw followed me, hopping across the piles of refuse, smelling in the gaps and glaring into any spot that was dark or able to hide someone or something. It was strange being back here again after so many days. The last time I was here, I couldn't see a thing. My eyes hadn't adjusted to the dark back then, but now I could see clearly. The great wall loomed ahead, blocking all vision past it, and there, tucked away among the junk, was my old camp. The fire in the middle, still piled with fresh logs. I cringed as I looked over and saw that the car wreck was still there, untouched. A shiver went down my spine as I thought of what had been in the footwell, what still probably lay on the floor, the other side of the wall. I wonder if he ever got to Namibia. The safe hadn't moved, and I could see now why I had thought it was strange, why I hadn't recognized it for what it was. The door was on the underside, where I couldn't open it, where I would never have seen it when I first arrived. I would need to turn it over. I leaned on it for a moment, waiting for the pain in my chest to stop. I nearly laughed. How ironic that when I return here, I'm not in a much better state than when I first arrived. As I was propping myself up on the safe, I happened to glance down. Something metallic was lying on the floor a few feet away, tucked underneath a broken kitchen table. I crouched down, reached into the gap, and plucked it from among the broken glass. It was my mobile phone. The first thing I tried was switching it on, like it would have been any use. Of course, there was nothing. The battery must have run down. I looked at it puzzled. It was my phone, sure enough, but somehow it was wrong. I couldn't place why. Adler and Rudy were watching me the whole time.
Find something?
I smiled. My phone. I wondered where it had gone. Adler frowned and peered at it.
That is a phone, he said, shaking his head. How things have changed in the decades I have been here.
We all stood frowning at the safe, puzzling over what to do with it.
So, are we going to get that thing tipped over? Asked Rudy.
Ah, yes, said Adler. It seemed like a good idea at the time, turning it over.
Hosepipe.
Hosepipe?
Asked Rudy. I even remembered where I'd found it before. It wasn't far from the old camp, only a 10-minute walk. It didn't mean backtracking on ourselves a bit. I couldn't think of another way of moving the safe. All this junk lying around, and nothing looked useful for shifting it. It took a while to haul the rest of it out from underneath all the trash and rubble. The last time I had been here, I had cut off a bit that was quite easy to get at. I didn't have the luxury this time. I couldn't move some of the rubble, but I managed to uncover enough of the hose pipe to make a loop round the safe and give me a few feet to pull on. I was so relieved when it worked. After pulling and pulling for what seemed hours, I finally managed to topple the safe over onto one side. The noise was thunderous as it crashed through the piles of wood and broken glass, hitting the rock floor with a loud crack. Around me, the maw were startled and dropped into a crouch before they realized that there was no threat. I could have sworn Dog Thing was frowning at me. I tried the key. It was stiff. But after I wriggled it around in the lock, there was finally a satisfying clunk, and the door swung open. Piles of old papers and books spewed out, spilling across the ground. I rummaged around, feeling almost desperate as I got to the back of the safe, but it was there, right at the back, stuffed inside a book. It was a copy of Adler's thesis.
"Always something that puzzled me, that," said Adler. "Of all the things in my house that could have traveled here with me, it was a box of copies of my thesis. They were due to be picked up and taken to Oxford University after I had signed them. I kept finding them everywhere, all over, even in some of the houses in the city. It's so disheartening to know that they won't have been read."
I put the thesis in my pack. I'll keep this one for you. You never know. We may get back, and I can deliver it myself. Adler laughed.
"Only a few decades late."
I had all 4 compasses, each of them identical, except for one small detail. They each had one of the 4 compass directions engraved upon them: north, south, east, and west. Not one of the compasses moved any more when you turned them. I held them up, each dangling on an identical chain. So what do I do with these then? Rudy and Adler stood watching me.
"I have absolutely no idea," said Adler. "I know we have to find the way to the house that was never built, from the scaffolding, but once we are there, we are walking blind, I must admit. I had hoped that something significant might happen when all of them were together."
What do you mean?
"I haven't a clue, my friend."
Let's go and find out, then. We set off across the junkyard once more, heading straight towards the scaffolding. What is the house that was never built, Adler?
Just a name for the strange structure that appears to not even be there. I am not sure. I am certain that it has something to do with the scaffolding. It is strange, is it not? The scaffolding is there, like it surrounds a building, but there is no building. Such a curious thing. Is it for another purpose, I wonder? Did you ever go to the top?
No.
You never went up to see, even out of curiosity?
No, I didn't have time. I was too busy scavenging for food and water, too busy starving.
Ah, that's a shame. If you had gone up there, you might have ventured far enough to see the door. It's quite odd, just sitting there in the middle of nowhere. No hole for a key or anything useful, though.
How does that make it a device?
It's not as I understand it, anyway. But I believe the door is special in some way, that it might even be the device. I have not seen inside the door, if indeed it even goes inside anything. I read about it in a journal of sorts that I found in the city. It described what the person had found. Our nemesis also blurted some of his secrets once, while he was trying to get into the house on Merriweather Avenue. In between his curses, beyond the door, should be whatever he used to travel between places. How he did it, or how he used the keys, well, I don't know.
We passed the mountain of books that I remembered discovering on my expedition out from the first camp. Something had been rummaging in them since I was last here. Or maybe there were simply more books. I couldn't be certain. It had been a reasonably neat, if not huge, pile. Now they were strewn all over the ground like someone had been searching for something. The mob became fidgety as we approached the scaffolding site, and as we made our way round one of the massive junk hills, and the skeletal structure came into view, I found out why. There were zombie bodies everywhere, or at least bits of them. I hadn't heard any fighting as we approached, so the mob must have fought this battle long before we arrived. I trod carefully through the carnage, carefully keeping my distance in case one of them happened to still be moving. I never had a proper look at the scaffolding the first time I came by this way, and certainly didn't notice that it led round in a spiral, all the way from the ground to maybe 5, 6, or more levels high. I had an eerie feeling that I had been up there before, some kind of déjà vu, but I couldn't remember when or why. The memories were right there, hidden from me, screaming to pour out. There was something terribly familiar about all of it, and somehow I knew that there was something up that scaffolding that was waiting for me, something that had been waiting for me the whole time that I had been here. There was only one way to find out. It was on the 3rd floor. A door. Just a plain wooden door. But until you stood facing it, you couldn't see it. A single step in both directions, and it simply vanished from view. I reached out and pushed the door, but it didn't move. There was no handle to open it with. I remembered the keys and reached into my shirt and pulled them out. Something was happening, something I hadn't expected. One moment there were 4 compasses hanging on chains round my neck, and the next there was only one. I panicked and searched. How could I have lost the other 3? But something about the single compass in my hand was different. It looked closer, and I saw that all the 4 points in the compass were now showing on the one I held in my hand, and the compass was pointing directly ahead of me.
"How very curious,"
said Adler, as he peered over my shoulder.
"You were right. Something was supposed to happen,"
said Rudy. I reached out to the door, feeling solid wood, and pushed. It simply swung open.
"Even more curious. It would never open for me," said Adler. "The key," said Rudy. "I mean the compass. It was never whole before."
I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't told Adler or Rudy about the dream, about what I thought might be waiting for me in the room beyond the door. Was I going to die in the room beyond the door? Was I going to discover another grim scene of death? I took a deep breath and stepped across the short open space into the room beyond, trying to ignore the sheer drop down below as I crossed. Directly ahead of me was what I had dreaded seeing. It was the dressing table with the mirror. But there was something different here, something that was not the same as the dream. The seat was there in front of the table, but there was no one sitting in it, no dried and withered body. Had I been dreaming about the future? It wouldn't have been the first time. Was my death still to come from this room? But there was no choice. I went over to the chair and sat down in front of the mirror, brushed aside the dust and cobwebs that covered it, and stared directly at the face that reflected back at me. The face that wasn't mine. He was much older than me, with dark curly hair that was lined with gray streaks. His face was weathered and tired, with bags under his eyes. He looked sick and pale, and sweat dripped from his face. He was dressed in some strange uniform, a bright white shirt and a black jacket and gray trousers. There was a brightly colored piece of cloth with a picture of an eagle and a snake tied around his neck that seemed to have no particular function. "Who are you?" I realized that we had both said the same words together. "I'm James Halldon," we both replied, but then he looked confused. "No," he said, "that's wrong. That's not me at all. I'm not James Halldon, but I thought I was." I could see a change in his expression. The pallid color was fading, and his skin began to flush as though the blood in his body had only just remembered its job. I could feel my head throb for a moment, and then it was like someone had taken a heavy weight off the top of my head, one that I hadn't even noticed was there in the first place. "I am James Halldon, but who are you?" I asked. The man stared back at me, and then glanced around him. It was then that I saw that the room he was in was different as well. There were tiles up the wall. It looked like one of the old toilet rooms that I had seen in the ruins occasionally, and my team had gone to the old city to scavenge for supplies back when I was much younger. What was I thinking? Scavenging? Old city team? These memories were new. Where had they come from? My mind raced. The man in the mirror looked back at me. "I'm where I started," he said, as though he was surprised to even be there. "Where?" "I thought I was trapped in a dark place with monsters and ghosts, but I'm not. I'm still in the toilet at the service station. The mirror with you in it, it's here. I'm not in the dark at all." It's you that is trapped. You! You are the face in the mirror that I saw before everything changed. I didn't need to look behind to know that Adler and Rudy were standing there, watching over my shoulder. Whether they could see what I could see, hear what I could hear, I didn't know. But as the man in the mirror began to make sense of everything, so did I. With each memory that he recalled, another became clear to me. Many of the things that were in my head weren't true. They weren't my memories. They were his. This man who stared back at me from the mirror. One by one, the memories broke down and faded away. At first, each of them was vivid, like I had been there, like I had lived them. But then they became fuzzy memories that were faded after many years. Then finally they were gone, removed completely, not even forgotten, like they had never even been there. He smokes a different brand of cigarette to me, Mayfair, and somehow the brand is important to him. I always smoked whatever I could find. Now it was all so clear. It was never me that was puzzled by the cigarettes. It was him. You've been stuck in my head. It was a statement more than a question. Yes, he said. I remember now. I walked into the toilet, and there was this mirror. It didn't look as though it belonged here. It's so old and cracked. I went to the toilet, and then I washed my hands, and then I looked into the mirror, and you were looking back at me. I started to feel sick, dizzy, and then I was in the dark and lost. I was hurt, like I had fallen or something. But it's not true, is it? Was it a dream? No, this isn't a dream, it's real. But you are there, and I am here. Somehow things got mixed up. I remember now. I've looked into this mirror before. I was here before, but the first time I failed to do something I needed to do, something that I came here to do. It was the mirror. I looked into it and seen his face instead of my own. Something unexpected happened, and I stumbled, fell somewhere. Did I fall out of the door and off the scaffolding? That would explain my injuries. Did I bang my head? Was I merely confused? Somehow this stranger, this person from another world, had been in my head. I don't come from London. I've never even been to London. I don't even know where England is. I do. It's where I live, said the man. I'm not a salesman. I am, he replied, reaching down and picking up his briefcase, like that was significant somehow. He held on to the briefcase like it was precious. I never met a tramp on a bus, did I? No, that was me when I was a child. I never knew his name until now. He was called Rudy, but I have never met him again since. No, but I have. How did this happen? He asked. I just saw everything. I just spent the last God knows how many days in that place. I don't know. Somehow, when we both looked into the mirror, we got mixed up. I've been stuck in your head all this time, when in truth I was standing right here in the toilet. How long have I been standing here? He looked at his mobile phone. 10 minutes? He said. I've only been here for 10 minutes? I mirrored him, taking out the mobile phone I had found earlier. I shook my head, confused. I had no idea what this device was for. Earlier, when I found it, I had known. But now it was only a dead gadget from a forgotten age, with no meaning to me. The man in the mirror looked away. I don't know what he was looking at, but I could sense his relief, his joy at knowing that he was still alive and free. As soon as he stepped out of that toilet door, his life would be normal again. Then he was gone, and I was staring at an empty toilet. Just like that, he left. He didn't even say goodbye. I stood up and turned to Adler and Rudy. I could tell by their shocked expressions that they had witnessed it all. His device, said the voice in my head. His creation for drawing people here. To make his creations. You could not control it. I tried to warn you, but you came here anyway. This was why I was here. This thing in front of me. It may have looked like a mirror, but it was something far more sinister. The memory, or at least part of it, sharpened in my mind, unlike most of my memories, which were scrambled even more now that many of them had left. My previous life in London, somewhere called Earth, Being a salesman, driving a car, riding a bus to work, that was all someone else's memories. Who was I? Where had I come from? I'd spent so many days now searching for a way to get back to a world that wasn't even my own. Was it possible that this was where I had come from? Or maybe one of the doors that led to other places? Was my home through one of those doors? I looked back towards the mirror, and then to Adler and Rudy. That's your world through there. But it's not my world.
How can you be sure?
Asked Rudy. Because I remember some things. But I know that I have never known that place. I have never even been there. Those memories were his. They weren't mine. You should go. Rudy stared at me.
What? We can't leave you here. I can't leave you here.
Yes, you can. You have to.
I can't. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't. I don't even know how to.
Try going through it. Going through the mirror while it is still your world through it. I don't know if it will work, but if Cutter Jack can bring people through it, maybe you can go back that way. It may be the only chance you ever get.
I don't think I can do it,
said Rudy, shaking his head and backing away. You have to try. It may be the only chance you will ever get to go back home. I have to destroy this thing, and I have to do it now, before some other stupid disaster stops me from doing it.
I think what Rudy is trying to say is that he doesn't want to, interrupted Adler.
I stood there for a moment, confused. Why?
Because back there I will just be dead, said Rudy. Back there I will go, well, I don't know where I will go. At least with you, I still have something like a life. Back there, I was homeless and alone. I led a pointless and hopeless life. At least here, I have friends and some purpose.
What purpose?
To destroy those like him. To fight for something. To help you.
I didn't know what to say. It was Adler who spoke.
I also have no reason to go back now. All the time I was alive, I sought to find my way back to my home, back to the life I led before. But now I am no longer living, and after having discovered all this place and the knowledge that there are other places, I don't want this to end. There's so much more to discover, other worlds, James.
If you are sure. They both nodded.
And besides,
said Adler cheerfully,
we still have to find out who you really are, don't we?
Yes, it would seem that way. I thought I was starting to get some idea of who I was.
Then let us start doing so right now. Destroy the device before that evil thing that is no doubt waiting for us outside somewhere right now, trying to figure out how to get past the mall and get in here, actually manages to.
I looked back at the mirror. The image of the toilet was gone. Now there was only darkness, no reflection. Cutter Jack used this device to capture his victims, and I was here to destroy it. How I knew this I could not remember, but I knew that it was what I had been sent here to do. I don't know who sent me here, or if there was even a plan for me to escape once I had succeeded, but I knew that if I didn't finish this now, countless more souls would suffer. Somehow the first time I had tried to do this, I had failed. It had trapped me. We can't use this to escape.
No, said Adler. I think you are right. My original ideas that he used it to travel were wrong. I can't see how it can be used to travel other than maybe using it to control someone on the other side or bring people here. There has to be something else, another way. Or maybe it can be used in another way.
Yes, but how? I heard the familiar sound of dog thing growling.
We need to find another door.
I felt something warm on my chest and reached inside my shirt to pull out the compass. It was glowing. A spark of light shot out from it to strike the mirror, and the darkness inside the glass vanished. Instead, there was a clear image of a wall. I squinted to see what might be significant about the wall. It wasn't like the ancient wall outside. This was made of bricks, not massive stone blocks. and it didn't look that old.
"Look,"
said Adler, pointing. The image was changing. Where there had been bricks, there was now a seam of light surrounding what looked like the shape of a door. It opened slightly, and then the image was gone.
"I know that place. I've seen it before, but there's no door in that wall."
"Where is it?"
"It's over the Great Wall. The scaffolding goes higher, much higher, and then it goes over the wall at the top. I went there once, a long time ago, long before I discovered this door, but it leads to a platform that goes over the void that is the other side of the wall. But it ends at a brick wall. I always thought it was a curious place to put a wall. It doesn't even block anything. It's just there on a small rocky outcrop at the end of the platform."
The compass glowed again. "The direction of the compass has changed. It's like it's pointing us somewhere towards the Great Wall."
"Then let us go quickly. But first destroy that thing,"
said Adler. I turned back to the mirror and drew my blade, turning it in my hand. With a grunt, I thrust the blunt pommel into the black glass. I hit it again and again. The third strike, the mirror shattered, scattering glass fragments across the room. Unfortunately, so did the ground underneath me. Floorboards collapsed, bricks crumbled, and the roof of the building began to fall in. I stumbled, hauled myself up again, and ran for the entrance. It seemed like the very fabric of the building was being torn apart. Through the gaps in the wall, I could see darkness and mist and things, immense things, clawing at the building and tearing it apart. I reached the doorway and jumped, barely landing on the scaffolding, skidding to a halt a few inches before I toppled over the edge. I turned back around, bracing myself, expecting to see a building collapsing. But there was nothing. Even the door had gone. Dog Thing sat a few feet away, waiting patiently for us.
"Where now?"
asked Rudy, as I tried to get my breath back. "We go up," I said, glancing at the levels of the scaffolding platforms that rose up above us until the darkness swallowed them. "And let's hope that door is still open when we get there." 8 floors up and probably 200 feet from the ground, I discovered where the platform finally led to. It was exactly as Adler had said. Instead of rising up further and further, it drew level with the top of the wall that Adler was so convinced marked some kind of boundary that shouldn't be crossed, at least not from the ground. From there, the platform extended towards the wall and then over it, where it stretched outwards into the darkness and continued on and on. I stood there for a moment, peering down over the other side of the wall, into the emptiness below. I could still see the ground behind us, and some of the maw moving around. Most of them were up on the scaffolding following us. The other side of the wall, where I had only been once, by pure accident, was an empty, endless void. There was scaffolding holding up the walkway on the other side. Roughly every 10 feet or so, the metal struts poked out of the darkness and upwards to hold the wooden planks in place, but I couldn't see where they ended.
"Are we going across there?"
asked Rudy. I shrugged. "I don't think we have a lot of choice."
"It is not far," said Adler. "Even if it looks it, the wall on the outcrop is only just out of sight along the platform."
Dog Thing was right behind us, and behind him came the rest of the maw. Below, I could see what might be the last few stragglers jumping up onto the bottom of the wooden slope below. It seemed to me, as I walked across that rickety wooden platform into the darkness ahead, that with every single step it might give way, and we would all tumble down into the darkness below. I'd only walked about 10 feet when the wall with the door in it came into view, giving me a little more confidence to move on. I was about halfway across the space between the top of the wall and the door at the end when I happened to glance back down into the darkness below. I wished I hadn't done that. Very little light was down there, only the faint glow from some stalactites that I could see high above us. I wondered if they were in the ceiling and if there was a roof to this place that was just out of view. The crystals cast a small amount of light down onto the platform and the ground below, just enough to see what was there. At first I couldn't make out what it was that I was seeing. It looked like the surface of some strange rock formation, spread across the ground below, but as I stopped and squinted, trying to focus on the strange bumpy shapes, something moved. One of the rocks below shifted, nudging the one next to it. From there, a kind of wave effect spread across the ground. I still hadn't figured out what I was looking at, even though it was moving. I was convinced that I was viewing some new and strange but natural phenomenon. Then one of the rocks looked up and moaned, and I realized that I wasn't seeing the ground at all. They weren't strange rocks. They were heads. Every single one of them. Thousands upon thousands, crammed together, moaning and moving, shifting, pushing and shoving each other. The ground underneath the rickety platform that we were all walking on was a sea of zombies. I stopped walking. "Do you see them?" "Yes," it was Rudy who answered. "Keep moving, slowly, quietly," the voice in my head. "Through the door, go through the door. This will all be over soon." I focused, tried to fight back the fear, the tiredness, and walked slowly forward, every moment telling myself over and over in my head that there was nothing there, nothing below us, only the door. Just go through the door. One step at a time, the door got closer. One step at a time, I breathed slowly, deeply. I stepped off the platform and onto the rocky ground. It was a small outcrop, as the professor had said, and the wall was merely a freestanding block of bricks, maybe 10 feet high and 10 feet wide. The edge of the door glowed faintly as I stepped nearer. I reached out to touch it, and just that slight touch was enough to open it. I stepped through and stumbled into daylight. I staggered, moving forward a few steps, struggling to grasp my new surroundings. The skeletal remains of massive, derelict buildings rose on either side of me. The ground was broken. It had probably been a road once. Now grass and weeds broke the tarmac. It was day, but it was still dark. Above me the sun shone only through small gaps in the gray clouds that drifted overhead at a speed that was astonishing. A cold blast of wind gusted down the open street, and I had to brace against it to stop myself from falling over. Rubble, broken windows, and burnt-out vehicles littered the street, and not just this street. I was standing in a dead end, with a solid wall behind me, except for the hole through which Rudy and Adler now stepped. The street stretched on, and beyond that were more ruined streets, more ruined buildings and vehicle wrecks. From the seat of the car next to me stared the withered, cold, bleach-boned face of someone who had been dead for a long time. An entire city lying derelict, ruined and dead. A noise behind me startled me, and I turned to see the mob begin to flood through the hole, pacing down the street, spreading out, not stopping, so that the rest of their kind could escape through the door that we had opened. After a few minutes, they stopped coming through. Dog Thing was by my side. "It's time to close it now," said the voice in my head. I looked down at Dog Thing. "Before he escapes too, before they come." Then I knew. The voice in my head was Dog Thing. He had been speaking to me all this time. He looked back towards the door and started to growl. Other maw nearby spun round and crouched down low, baring their teeth ready to spring at whatever was coming from the other side, whatever was about to escape with us. "He comes," said Dog Thing. I could hear the thud of heavy feet on the wooden platform approaching fast, but he never got there in time. I reached for the door. There was no handle to pull, so I grabbed the edge and pushed, quickly taking my hand away. The last thing I saw through the opening was Cutter Jack, a few feet away, reaching out with both hands, his one eye wide with anger or fear, running towards us. Behind him were his lizard pets, many of them tearing along the wooden boards as fast as they could go, each of them with a look of death in their eyes, and beyond that a wave of moaning and screaming, the cries of countless tortured souls. I swore that I heard Cutter Jack scream just as the door closed and vanished, leaving a solid brick wall in front of me. I staggered back, expecting the wall to collapse in front of me and Cutter Jack to come bursting through with his lizard cats and an army of zombies. But there was nothing. It was over. I turned, seeking the others, Adler and Rudy. They were a few feet away, staring up at the towering ruins that stretched on as far as I could see.
"Something terrible must have happened to this place," said Adler.
"I don't remember," I replied. I turned back to Dog Thing and knelt down. This time he came forward and nuzzled his head in my lap. I ruffled his fur. "You've been talking to me all along, haven't you?" "Yes, but I don't think you always heard me." "Why did you help me? Why did you help us?" "Because I'm your friend." "My friend? I don't remember." "I know. It was after you fell, after we found Nualath's device. I didn't understand why you weren't breaking it. That was why we went there. That was what we came here for." "Nualath?"
"Cutter Jack. He goes by many names. That's what you always said."
"So, I've known you all along, right from the beginning? That's why you came to me in the junkyard?"
"Yes, I came here with you to destroy the device. I'm your guard, your companion. But you became something different, something I couldn't understand. After you looked into the device, you changed. You weren't you. There was someone else there. I was frightened."
"You've always been with me, haven't you? I just can't remember why."
"Yes, you raised me from when I was a puppy."
"I raised you? I wish I could remember."
"Ever since I can remember, I've followed you."
"But the other Maw, where are they from?"
"I'd never seen another one of my kind. They were trapped in there, in Nualath's prison. I found them. They didn't like me at the start, but they became my friends, and I told them that if they helped me, if they helped you, you would help them escape that place forever."
"Do you have a name other than Dog Thing?"
"No, that's what you always called me."
I stood up and looked around at the world we had returned to. Somehow I knew that although we had escaped back to where we had started, this place was no more my home than the prison we had left behind. It should be familiar, but my memories still haven't returned. We found a building not far down the street to camp up in for the night that still had windows and a door that could be shut. Day 39. I slept well for the first time in weeks, and woke up to a sound that in my memory I never even heard before. I looked through the dirt-crusted window and saw that outside Rudy and Adler were listening, smiling, so I opened the door and joined them. A grin crossed my face as I felt the warmth of the sun. High up on the top of the building across the street was a single nest of birds. I didn't know what sort of bird they were. One of them was perched on a ledge just below the nest singing. This is the last page in this journal. I've run out of space to write for now, until I find another book. I'm sure I will soon. So much still to discover, and so many questions still unanswered, all locked away in my own mind. There is a whole new place here for me to explore. Even as I look round, there are things that are somehow familiar, yet my own mind has locked it all away. I should be afraid, like I was when I first came round in the dark in the corridor. But I'm not alone this time. I've got Rudy and Adler, and I've got Dog Thing. It's amazing how much fear is lessened when you have friends to look out for you.